Thank you. I'll start again. It's now 4:01, and this is the August meeting of the Nantucket Board of Health, Thursday, August 21st. The meeting is, as usual, being audio and visually recorded. And our really first agenda item is an update on public comment questions that came to us from prior Board of Health meetings, having really to do largely with short-term rentals. So I'm going to read you the questions, and I'm going to read you the answers. The first question was, how many STRs are currently registered on Nantucket? And the answer to that, as of August 18th, 2025, is 1,347. The second question is, what is the gross STR registration fee income for fiscal year 2025? So doing the math on that, 1,347 times $250 comes to 336,750. So the answer is that the registration fee income is 336,750. Now the third question is, how many inspections of STRs have been made by health department staff? And I find that this is an interesting question because I think that the public perhaps has not had the correct idea on this. So we're going to read the answer, and Rocky can clarify if for some reason I don't say it clearly, but I think I will. So the answer to how many inspections of STRs have been made by the health department is routine or yearly inspections are not part of the Board of Health Regulation, Chapter 338. Routine inspections of short-term rentals are in the domain of the Nantucket Building Department. The health department will only do an inspection in response to a complaint as needed, and none have been done in direct response to a short-term rental complaint in 2025. Meredith, did you want to?
I just found that was super interesting because they inspect everything else, and there's all of these rules in the short-term rental regulation that say they have to have like exit signs and all of these things, and yet we're just handing out registrations without confirming that people know where the exits are, like all of the safety stuff. I thought that was interesting, and I'm not trying to put more on the health department's plate. I just thought that was
Well, that's the reason that I said what I said, that I think that not only some of us on the board, but the public at large perhaps did not ever understand that. Rocky, would you fill in for me anything you think that people should know?
I mean, that's the response as formulated. I don't really think I have anything else to say on the topic other than it's clearly laid out. That is a building code. That's a building department function.
So basically the answer here is that the health department does not inspect short-term rentals. The next question is how many complaints have been made to the special STR complaint hotline? That answer is 5. How many STR complaints have been made to the police department relative to noise, parking, trash, and other issues? That answer is unknown. These records are maintained by the police department. What types of complaints have been recorded? Noise, overcrowding, whether the dwelling is registered as a short-term rental. What is the disposition of these complaints? All complaints are referred to the appropriate department for follow-up and response. There are no outstanding complaints that the health department is aware of. What is the allocated health department budget item for short-term rental registration, administration, enforcement for fiscal year 2026? The health department does not have a separate budget for this activity, which has been incorporated into its regular workload. However, the department is in the final stages of hiring a short-term rental community liaison whose role will focus specifically on this work. And the final question that I have here is, does the Nantucket Board of Health have policies and protocols to instruct and educate members of local boards approving development, often without waivers, when there is documented contamination abutting a property? Answer: no, the Nantucket Board of Health does not have policies or protocols to instruct and educate members of other local boards. The Board of Health does not have oversight over other town boards. However, the Health Department is available to provide consultation and assistance to local boards upon request. So, I guess we go on to public comment. That is agenda item number 3, other public comment. Are there people who want to speak on this particular issue?
Madam Chair, I just want to point out that Ms. Balzer has her hand up online for public comment when you move to that item. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I'm just appearing before you today because I am hoping to get some clarity. I've been trying to register my short-term rentals on my property for quite a few months, and I have spoken to many people in the town, the DOR, attorneys.
I think we can't hear.
Yeah, you're breaking up or we lost you. Yep, still breaking up.
Now,
Yep.
I'm taking my son up to college, so I'm driving. I'll do my best. So it's the board to these.
Unfortunately, we can't hear.
Renters. Okay, I will try to get a better connection.
Okay.
I will dial back in and see if I get a better connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time?
I see that Carrie, looks like Carrie's online now too. I'm not sure which time you logged in, Carrie.
Yeah, 4:06.
Oh, good, all right. Are there comments from the public at this time? All right, hearing none.
She has her hand
Is
up
she
again.
back?
Yep.
Oh, good. Ms. Balser?
Yes, can you hear me now? I wanted to try again.
I think we can, at least right
Oh,
now.
good. Okay, thank you. I don't know how much you heard of my question before, but I am hoping to get some help from the Board of Health today, Chair Smith, because I have been engaged in trying to register my 2 short-term rentals for some months. And I've talked to many people in the town to help me with this. And there's confusion about whether I should be paying the community impact fee, since it's my only property where I live. It's my primary property. But also, there's some other questions that have come up in the registration process. And I've heard from others that it's very confusing, and that we're all hoping to get some consistent published advice by the Board of Health. I think would really help owners and renters alike understand this new community impact fee and the new local registration, so that everybody could be on the same page. And I just want to conclude by saying that I've talked to many realtors, town council, the town manager, the staff at the health department in person 3 different times, 2 different attorneys, and a select board member. And I still have inconsistent information about how to proceed. So any clarity that you could give or publish so that everybody could use the same information would be much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. ahead.
Charity Benz. I'm surprised at this, since 1,350 people have been able to register very successfully. I'm surprised at that public comment.
Would it be helpful to have a process or an explanation of the process?
I don't think we're supposed to answer it. I think that's just public comment, and they can wait until next month or speak to the staff at the Board of Health, because
If there's a request, we can put it on as an agenda item on, the process of registering. That's kind of what it sounds like people may be looking for.
We can certainly add that as agenda item. That process does exist online currently.
Correct.
There's also a frequently asked questions and a video, and the registration, as has been stated, has been successful for 1,347 people. There is no backlog in the system right now. So we can put it on the agenda if you like. Just let me know.
Okay. That's great. Okay, let's see. I guess,
Carolyn had her hand up first.
I think she took it down.
Oh, well, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. I understand that there's 1,345 people who are registered. I think my situation's different because I have 2 homes on one property, and it is my only residence. And yet, the answer as to whether I should pay the community impact fee, and several other people that I know, this is the thing that is confusing, and I've received contradictory advice. So I'm just hoping for clarification from you guys so that I can conclude the registration process.
Okay,
Madam Chair, if I might, I know we don't really respond to in public comment, but I want to say the community impact fee is a mechanism through the state. And I think that any citizen should engage their their accountant or a tax attorney or et cetera on that. I don't see how that's the Board of Health's purview whatsoever.
Okay, Meg Ruley.
Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I know you're going to be talking about PFAS later on, but I wanted to bring this up because you're talking about the short-term rental database. Will the Board of Health be adding into the short-term rental database whether or not a homeowner is on a private well? That is not currently one of the fields to fill out, and I just wondered if that was something that the Board of Health would consider adding to the short-term rental database. And that would just be a way for the imminent hazard administrator to reach out to people to encourage them to test. And then also just notifying people when high levels of PFAS are detected. I typically, the different boards put warnings in the newspaper, like if there's septic, regulations that change. Will there be warnings in the newspaper that indicate that high levels of a contaminant have been discovered, and to have contact information of who to reach out? I'm just thinking about the digital divide. Not everybody logs on to the town's website or comes to these meetings. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I hope it's okay to do that in public comment.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, I have Kathy Bard.
Hi, just quickly, thank you. Just to follow up on some of the questions that get asked, and I think what people are getting caught in is getting different answers from the state than they get from the local registry, and being caught in the middle of which one's right when you get two different answers. And I think that something like the state requiring one license per property, but the town wants to have two permits if you have two STRs on the same property. Those kinds of things, it's like, which one do you do? Do you go get another one from the state, or does the town have to accept what the state's doing? So there's just little places that fall through the cracks that get into people's way. And if somebody could navigate the differences between the two and what is needed to satisfy Nantucket and not violate the state, that would probably be helpful for people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Rebecca.
Rebecca, are we back?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think we can now.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I'm just probably adding to the clarification, but I think, in my opinion, and I've been close to the registration since pre-day one. In my opinion, the basic registration itself works reasonably well, except for the process for getting these points clarified, like around the community impact fee and the number of registrations required based on having more than one STR per property, as Kathy has indicated. I think what we've found in the past is that there doesn't seem to be an easy process to submit a question like that and make sure the answer to that not only is shared with the person making the question, but also published so that it reduces the further burden on the health department to answer questions. So if 20 people have the questions, answer it once, publish the answer, and then have the whole process be more efficient. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Do we see anyone else, John?
No, that looks like, yeah.
Okay. Our next agenda item is number 4, which is the approval of minutes from the meeting that took place on July the 17th. Any
So,
comments?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
We noticed an error in the minutes.
Oh.
The staff did. It was agenda item number 8 last meeting, 13 Woodland Drive. Lot 5, the motion was made. The discussion revolved around milligrams per liter. And in the motion, it says 19 milligrams per milliliters, which is not a correct mix. That's more nitrogen than water. So So the discussion was really 19 milligrams per liter. So,
In my copy,
Actually-
there is a correction, the correction was made.
okay, all right, that was in there, okay.
Any comments or questions on this?
Sorry, I thought the next one down, 13 Woodland Drive, Lot 6, there was discussion that it wasn't a legal lot, or there was a question of it, but also it's saying they're asking for 7 bedrooms. I thought it was 6.
I believe the proposal's for 7. I can,
Okay.
that'll be later on the agenda, plan.
Anything else? We have a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, motion to approve as amended, incorporating Mr. Hedden's comments.
Second.
Okay. Tom?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
We
You
have
have
to
to
do roll
do-
call. since
Oh,
we're
that's right.
remote.
All right, so I started with Tom. Yeah, Tom said yes. Jim?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Ann? Yes. All right, minutes are approved. All right, now we have a presentation on the outcome of the PFAS sampling testing in beach water. And I think to make this efficient and to make this meaningful, we'd like to have 15 minutes of presentation and then hold our comments to 15 minutes as well.
Yeah,
So-
thank you, Madam Chair. I can take it from here. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Shapiro, the Environmental Contamination Administrator. At the past few Board of Health meetings, I have discussed that we are conducting sampling at our public bathing beaches for PFAS. I'm pleased to say that we have the results from our first round of sampling. And we have Dr. Rebecca DeVries, who helped us design and sample and analyze the data, who will be giving the presentation and will be available for questions and comments at the end. John, are you able to share your screen and share Rebecca's slides?
Yeah, or can Rebecca, do you want to share your screen, or do we just,
I've got it ready to go. I'm happy to share it.
okay, if you want to do that, that would be
Yeah.
probably easier.
All right, hold on. Almost there. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. DeVries, feel free to take it away.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Andrew, for the warm introduction. My name is Rebecca DeVries, and I work at Eastern Research Group, a consulting firm that was hired to support this sampling effort. Today, I'm going to share some preliminary findings from our first round of surface water and foam sampling at beaches across the island. You go to the next slide, please.
Bear with me 1 second. Here we go.
Thank you. So we'll start with some background on why the town of Nantucket initiated this project. In May of 2024, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health released a document called Operational Guidance for Bathing Beaches and PFAS Impacted Water Bodies. This guidance explains how to collect surface water samples at beaches and how to interpret the PFAS results from those samples in terms of potential human health risks. It also provides conservative health-based screening values for 8 individual PFAS compounds, along with recommended actions depending on how measured results compare to those values. For example, conducting additional sampling, evaluation, or imposing swimming restrictions. It's important to note, though, that this guidance is not a requirement. Municipalities and beach operators are not obligated to test public beaches for PFAS. However, the guidance does note that testing may be conducted if a recreational beach is near a known PFAS source or as part of a broader ongoing monitoring or surveillance program. Given that context and the ongoing PFAS investigations on the island, the town initiated a project to characterize PFAS levels in surface water and sea foam, if it's present, at coastal beaches and inland ponds to assess potential public health risks from recreational water use. Specifically, we sought to measure PFAS in surface water from 16 coastal beaches, many of the same beaches that are routinely monitored weekly for bacteria, as well as 3 inland ponds. We also sampled 2 nearshore areas, each located roughly 1 mile off the northern coast of the island, to serve as background or comparison locations. We included foam sampling as part of this project since some recent studies have shown PFAS may accumulate or concentrate in foam, potentially resulting in increased exposure and risk. As for the timeline, this project began in June. Our first task was to develop a sampling and analysis plan that outlined exactly where and how we would collect the samples. In early July, we collected our first round of samples. Next week, we'll return and collect a second round at the same locations. Then in October, once we have those newer results and have had time to assess them alongside the July data, we'll prepare a summary report with our findings and recommendations. So today, as indicated by the red arrow on the slide, we'll be sharing a brief update and some preliminary results from just this first round of sampling. So how did we do this? Starting with surface water, we collected 1 sample at each of our 21 selected locations. For each sample, we filled 2 bottles that were provided by a commercial laboratory. And you can see what those look like in the image on this slide. These made up our primary samples for analysis. We also collected duplicate samples at 3 locations. This means at each of those 3 locations, we collected 2 samples from the exact same spot, one immediately after the other. The purpose of those duplicates is basically quality control, to check our results. Essentially, we wanted to make sure that we would see similar PFAS results from 2 samples collected at the same place and at the same time. You can think of this as a check on both our field methods as well as laboratory analysis. And I'll mention here that the results for all of our duplicate pairs were in fact very similar and within the acceptance criteria that we expected and hoped to see. In addition, we collected what's called a field blank at 2 locations. We prepared these field blanks in the field using PFAS-free water provided by the lab, following the exact same procedures we use for our regular samples. We had the lab analyze these blanks to confirm that no PFAS were present, which helps us ensure that we haven't introduced any PFAS contamination during sample collection. And I'll mention here that no PFAS were detected in the blanks that we prepared as part of this project. As far as our methods, all of our surface water sampling methods follow DPH's guidance and were designed specifically to minimize the potential for PFAS cross-contamination. We also collected foam samples at locations where there was enough foam present to do so. Now, the tricky part with foam sampling for PFAS analysis is that the lab analyzes only the liquid portion of the foam for PFAS, and the lab requires a specific volume of that liquid to run their analyses. Specifically, they require 500 milliliters of liquid, which is about the amount that would fit into one of those bottles I just showed on the last slide. The big question mark around this, though, is how much foam is needed to get that much liquid for analysis. For this sampling event, our goal was to fill 3 one-gallon bags of foam at each location where we collected a sample. We then let the foam sit in the bags in coolers on ice for at least 24 hours or until most of the foam had collapsed. The resulting liquid from the collapsed foam was then transferred into sample bottles for laboratory analysis, just the same as our surface water samples. Now, I do want to just pause here and take a moment to mention that this is still a very new area of study and pretty exploratory in nature. There's only a handful of published examples of PFAS sampling in this foam. But for this project, we did follow methods that are recommended and have been used by others, including guidance published by the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy for some foam sampling they've done in the Great Lakes, as well as some approaches that we've seen in the peer-reviewed literature. So for this round, we really sought to get an understanding of how much liquid we would actually get from a given volume of foam and what kind of PFAS levels we might see. in the foam. And just for some context, the image on this slide shows some of our foam samples in that collapsing stage of the process. So what you're seeing here is the foam about 12 hours after it was collected, and you can see that the foam is starting to collapse and there's some liquid present. We would just let that sit longer and keep collapsing to get more of the liquid for analysis. Next slide, please. So where did we go? As I've mentioned several times, we've collected samples at 21 locations around the island. As shown on the map on this slide, most of the sites are coastal beaches, with a few located in protected harbor areas and a handful of inland ponds. Many of these locations are also sampled weekly for bacterial analysis. The figure shown in this slide also distinguishes locations where we only collected surface water, shown as the blue points, and where we collected both surface water and foam, shown as the orange points. So on the western side of the island, you'll see an orange point labeled N8, which is Nantucket Harbor. And on the eastern side, there's an orange point labeled S3, which is the Sachaka Pond. These are the only two locations where our field team observed foam during sampling, so the only locations that we currently have foam results. Next slide, Andrew. All of the samples that we collected were sent to a commercial laboratory for PFAS analysis. We sent them to PACE Analytical Services in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. They analyzed the samples for 40 different PFAS compounds using EPA method 1633A. And that's a validated and widely used method for detecting and quantifying PFAS in environmental samples. There's a link on this slide which can take you to the EPA's documentation for that method. Next slide. Moving on to the results, we'll start with surface water. And again, this is just from the first round of data. The first thing I'll mention is that we didn't find any PFAS at 9 of the 21 locations that we went to. This includes our 2 background locations, which again were located roughly a mile off the northern coast of the island. Of the PFAS that were detected, PFOA was detected most frequently and in about half of the samples. So the table on this slide shows the 9 PFAS that were detected in at least one location. The first column shows the PFAS compound, and the second column shows the frequency of detection, or how often a PFAS compound was detected across the locations that we sampled. So for example, PFOA is listed first in this table. As I said, this was the most frequently detected PFAS compound. You'll see here we found PFOA at 10 of the 21 locations that we tested. On the other end of this table, PFBS is listed last. We only detected PFBS at 1 of the locations that we tested. The last column shows the maximum detected concentration, or the highest level that we detected for a given PFAS across all locations. For instance, PFOA on that top row had a maximum concentration of 3.9 nanograms per liter, and PFBS on the bottom row had a maximum concentration of 1.9 nanograms per liter. Next slide. Considering human health risks, we evaluated these results following DPH's 2024 operational guidance for bathing beaches at PFAS-impacted water bodies, the document that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. We applied their initial screening value of 20 nanograms per liter to the 8 PFAS that DPH has determined have established toxicity criteria. Of those 8 PFAS, we detected 6 in our surface water samples, and those are flagged on the slide here with a blue star. So you'll see we detected PFOS, PFOA, PFHXS, PFHXA, PFBS, and PFBA. Next slide, please. The good news is that no individual PFAS result was detected above DPH's screening value for these 8 compounds. The figure on this slide shows the measure results of the 8 PFAS for all samples compared to DPH's screening value of 20 nanograms per liter. Each point or dot on the figure represents a result from a single location. The black or filled in dots indicate detected results, while the empty dots indicate that the PFAS was not detected, in which case it's shown here at a value equal to the laboratory's detection limit or the lowest concentration that the lab can reliably measure. The red line on the right side of the screen shows you where DPH's screening value of 20 nanograms per liter falls in comparison to the measured results from our samples. So as you can see in this figure, every reported result from our surface water samples fell below that screening value, indicating that no action was required and the water is considered safe for swimming. As you may have noticed in the table earlier, several other PFAS were detected in our surface water samples that are not included in DPH's operational beach guidance. 2 of these PFAS without established surface water screening values, PFOSA and PFHPA, were detected at low levels, only slightly above the detection limit at 3 locations. These levels are not expected to pose a health risk. PFPEA was also detected in 2 of our samples. At Miacomet Pond, PFPA was detected at a very low level, only slightly over the detection limit. At Sconset Beach, however, we observed a higher level of 210 nanograms per liter. I'll mention here that this sample was somewhat unique compared to others because it contained a large amount of red algae. It was basically unavoidable when we were collecting the sample. But given the result and uncertainty, we resampled this location about 2 weeks ago. During that resampling event, environmental conditions were quite different and there was minimal algae present. We just received the results for this sample, so they're not in this presentation, but I will say here that PFPA was not detected in the resampling. In fact, only one PFAS compound was detected and at a low level. So we will resample this location again next week as part of our second round of sampling and continue to evaluate things from there. Next slide, please. Moving on to foam. For foam, as I mentioned, we collected samples at 2 locations, Nantucket Harbor and Saskatchewan Pond. The results from both samples are shown on this slide. Across the 2 samples, we detected 20 different PFAS compounds. And in general, the concentrations in foam were much higher than those found in surface water samples, including surface water samples from the same location. However, I do want to point out here that many of the results, in fact, all of the results from Saskatchewan Pond were qualified by the laboratory as not meeting their quality assurance criteria. All of those qualifiers are noted here in the footnotes to the table. Most of them are tied to the fact that some of their extracted internal standards were outside of acceptance criteria, and this was largely because there was not sufficient volume in the sample. They didn't have enough liquid. As a reminder, the results from these foam samples come from the liquid portion obtained after collapsing a larger volume of foam. Again, we collected enough foam to fill 3 one-gallon bags. We let the foam settle, and then we sent the liquid portion to the lab for analysis. We were hoping to get 500 milliliters of liquid from that foam, but we ended up with closer to 150 milliliters, which made it challenging for the lab to analyze the samples in some cases. But what does this all mean? What can we learn from the results? Anyhow, our results do show that multiple PFAS compounds were detected in foam and some at elevated levels. However, many of the PFAS results were marked by the lab as qualified or flagged, meaning that they didn't meet the full data validation standards, mainly again because those sample volumes were very small. Ideally, and as I just mentioned, the lab would look for 500 milliliters of liquid, but our samples yielded much less. Because of this, they didn't meet all those criteria. What this means is that while we know PFAS are present and likely at these higher levels, we aren't certain of the exact concentration for these flagged analytes. Given this uncertainty, the town of Nantucket plans to collect more samples next week to confirm and better understand these findings. We'll try to collect more foam if available, and we've also coordinated with the lab to see if smaller volumes can be analyzed for this next round, especially knowing the concentrations that we're expecting to find. In terms of health, currently there are no published health-based guidance values or screening values for PFAS in foam. Because of this uncertainty and to be cautious, we recommend that residents and visitors avoid direct contact until further information is available. For next steps, next week, we'll collect a second round of samples We plan to resample all of the beach and pond locations except for those 2 nearshore background sites where we didn't find any PFAS. We'll also try to resample foam at the same 2 locations where we collected foam last time, if it's present, and collect additional foam samples if we can. We'll try to collect more foam this time, and we'll try to get a foam duplicate as well. In September, we expect to receive the analytical results from the August sampling event. And then finally, in October, we'll share a summary report that highlights key findings from both rounds of sampling, along with recommendations. And that brings me to the end of this presentation. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. DeVries, for that great presentation. Just another note on the foam sample results. We will be issuing a foam advisory tomorrow morning, encouraging residents to not contact the foam, including keeping pets, for example, dogs, outside of the foam. And that's out of an abundance of caution, given those high PFAS levels. We recommend that if anyone comes into contact with foam, that they rinse off and get out of the foam if they're continuing to be in there. We'll also have our sampling and analysis plan and the data and some frequently asked questions up on our website tomorrow morning. So we'll be continuing to advertise these results. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, we're going to allow 15 minutes of questions, but I just want to say thank you to Dr. DeVries. I think it was one of the most clear presentations of this type that I've ever heard, and very well done. So thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I don't know, Carrie or Meredith.
Yeah, Carrie here. When we had where PFAS was detected, the PFPEA was 210 nanograms per liter, which was hugely much more than the others. So I guess the question is there any thought that comes from that? And also, do we know what where that particular PFAS compound comes from? I mean, is there a certain type of material or chemicals that would be affiliated with that particular one? It was it was so much larger than the others.
Dr. DeVries, if you want to take that question, go for it.
Sure. I can tell you, Carrie, what we know. We're hoping to know more when we get another data point, but I'll be honest, we were a little surprised about that result. We consulted with the lab to try to understand why that one particular PFAS might have been detected at an order of magnitude higher than the others. And there was no clear answer. I'll say again, what was really unique about that sample is that there was a lot of red algae at that one location, including in the sample. So within the jar, there was a lot of algae mixed in. That's partly why we wanted to resample it, because it was unique in that way. I will say PFPEA is it's a breakdown product. A lot of other PFAS break down into it.
Okay.
It could be that it was tied up, bound to the algae in some way that we can't make a lot of sense of. But I think in the resampling, it was not detected at all. It wasn't detected at a lot of the other beaches. And I think we'll be able to say a little bit more when we have that third data point, which we'll hopefully get next week.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Meredith, did you want to speak?
Thank you so much. This is really awesome. I am interested to see the foam advisory because there's a lot of foam on the beaches right now, and this just reminds me sort of back when PFAS first came about, and the Matacasham Valley Road, I think, was who tested the highest, and when it's at the numbers that we're seeing in the foam, it was that I believe it's can damage your skin. It was not safe for people who had high levels to shower. Is that the same? That's why you're issuing the advisory?
I can take that question. Yeah, it's a high concentration. You saw up to 30,000 for an individual PFAS compound. We don't exactly know what it means for health. We know that it's a high concentration. There are some biases in the laboratory results that, we're going to try to iron out in the next sampling round. So we're still gathering more information, but we are one of the first towns to measure or to analyze PFAS in foam. So there's not a lot of guidance on how to interpret this data. And that's why, out of an abundance of caution, we are recommending that people avoid contact with foam.
Can I just add one thing, Andrew, an important point about some of those qualifiers from the lab do indicate that the results could be biased high. So I just think that's something to keep in mind as well. And that's why we're hoping in this next round, we can collect more foam so there's more volume so that we don't have data points that we have to interpret with those qualifiers attached to them, which make it a little bit challenging.
Carrie here, another question. With the beach foam, the Great Lakes was up in Michigan. That was one of the other sites where I guess they've done sea foam sampling, and we're doing it. There's not much else. Is there any difference between fresh water and salt water in terms of impact on sampling?
I can take that question. We only have 2 data points, so it's a little bit unclear at this point. But we analyzed both Saskatchewan Pond and Mattocket Harbor. So we have fresh water and we have salt water. So maybe with a little bit more data, we'll be able to answer that question better. We're hoping to collect more foam samples. We only saw foam at 2 locations last month, and if we see foam at more locations, we're gonna sample at more locations.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Would it be okay, Andrew, if I mention one thing?
Yeah.
Just for everybody's knowledge, at the sampling and analysis plan that Andrew mentioned will eventually be available, there is a memo at the end of that that has a very brief summary of some other studies that have looked at PFAS in foam. It's very limited, and it's almost exclusively fresh water. There's one study in the Cape Fear River estuary in North Carolina, but you can see what's been measured in some other similar efforts. But Carrie, to your point, it's a lot of fresh water.
I actually have a question, 2. One may be very naive, but I'd love to know the answer. Of all of those PFAS subcategories, are some more harmful than others?
I can take that question. So Mass DPH uses an initial screening value of 20 parts per trillion for 8 different PFAS. After that threshold, they move into the space where they start looking at individual PFAS and looking at their different toxicity parameters. We do know that PFOA and PFOS are generally more toxic than other PFAS, but the other compounds do have the other 6 in the guidance do have established toxicity values.
Thanks. My other question is about the foam. The reason that only 2 areas were sampled is that that's the only places you saw foam?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are there other questions from anyone here? All right, well then, thank you. This has been very, very helpful and eye-opening and everything else, and we'll be interested in what the final report says.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. DeVries, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 6 on the agenda. 24 Ridge Lane, a septic loan request for a septic repair.
Yep, this is due to a failed system and they're upgrading, so they applied for the loan. This is their permanent address, primary residency. We went through the application and we recommend approving the loan.
All right. Motion to approve? Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Jim? Meredith?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Anne? Aye. That loan is approved. And now we have a variance request from Wicked Island Bakery for hair restraints.
Should I just start?
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Heather Woodbury. I am the owner and GM at Wicked Island Bakery. Wicked Island Bakery is requesting a variance for code FC2-40211 hair restraints for front of house employees only. We have been in operation since March 2013. When discussing our front of house staff prior to opening, both inspectors Richard Ray and Artel Crowley told me that the employees would be considered wait staff, not kitchen employees. Hair restraints were not needed then. This included their ability to pour soup into a to-go container and package items in a box or bag. Should menu or items the front of house handles change, they would be required to wear hair nets or hair restraints. Apparently, the new law went into effect in 2018, requiring counter staff to wear hair restraints. When we moved into 7B Bayberry Court in 2019, during our initial setup of the kitchen and inspections, prior to opening, we worked with the health department, including both Kathy Flynn and Kathy LaFave, among others. I specifically asked that based on the new building setup, our old kitchen was in one end and the retail and customer area was in a whole other end of the building. And now it is directly behind us. I asked if we needed to change that, and we were told no. We made the decision not to add items like bagels and things that we could have done in our new space because I didn't want to open that can of worms of having my front of house staff handle food and prepare things like that. Our kitchen staff who prepares and handles all the foods, they wear hats. If it's the kitchen staff who takes the trays from the oven, places them on racks out front and the display. You can see in the two pictures that I sent of the bakery, the food display is displayed on a 3-foot wide table and is 2 feet, the food where it sits is 2 feet from the staff. They're literally reaching over to get it. And the trade food is behind them, 3 feet behind them. Gloves, bakery tissue, et cetera, is used to handle the food. All of our front of house staff have their hair tied up and back. No one's wearing their hair down up front. And then it says, per the Massachusetts Health Code, that there's no need for health or for hair restraints if they present a minimal risk of being contaminated or exposing food, clean equipment, utensils, and linens. We were also advised during our move to add the 30-inch tall glass sneeze guard. In order to have your mouth above the glass, you must be taller than 6'2". The glass is the highest sneeze guard on Nantucket. It also creates a little bit of a sound barrier when our staff is trying to talk to customers. I truly believe that our front of house staff poses a small risk of hair contamination, less so than a server who enters a kitchen and picks up food, stands in the pass, and carries trays up by their head. I said there are even establishments, which there's a picture in there for you guys to see, of an open kitchen directly behind a counter where customers sit, and the wait staff is a mere feet from the kitchen line as they work, and they are entitled to work without hats or hair restraints. Our front of house staff does not enter the kitchen or food production area except to cross over to the stairs to take dirty trays and things down to the dish room or to enter into the walk-in fridge to grab dairy products to refill the coffee station. I am respectfully asking that the Nantucket Health Department grant us a variance for the hair restraints for our front of house employees only, or allow our front of house to be qualified as wait staff. And then I included, per the General Court of Massachusetts, it says wait staff employee is defined. And if you see the highlighted part, it says, as part of a team of counter staff or any other counter employees, it serves beverages and prepared food directly to patrons, which is what my staff is. I said, we've operated a clean and safe and rule-abiding year-round business for the past 14 seasons. Every issue that's ever been brought to us by the health department, we have corrected and fixed, including new floors, keeping a hand sink that's technically tucked behind a fire door that was grandfathered in, that we decided that it would be better to have a hand sink than no hand sink on what we call the first floor. My husband, the chef, has a great, amazing track record with the health department. And I'm just asking for a variance, whether it can be a year, longer. That's, I guess, up to discussion with you guys, but thank you.
Thanks. Any, may I ask, John, am I correct that we gave this variance a year ago approximately?
Yes, that's correct. That's in the, I think that was on the packet, and I included the minutes with that from last year. So the answer to your question is
Has
yes.
anything changed since then?
In terms of,
Anything?
not to my knowledge. It was just previously observed that the counter staff was serving unwrapped and unpackaged food before.
May I ask what the recommendation on this one from the health department is?
Yeah, so included in the packet, yeah, the regulation says, in regard to hair restraints, employees such as counter staff who only serve beverages and wrapped or packaged foods, hostesses and wait staff, if they present a minimal risk of contamination, exposing food, cleaning equipment, utensils, et cetera. So even by that, a wait staff could be, if they were even proposing a minimal risk or presenting them a minimal risk, that would still allow, that to be enforced for them to wear a hair restraint. Like maybe some wacky excessive clown hair or something, might, that couldn't be pulled back or something out of control, that, we could enforce that as well. But again, that's part of the code, that at Wicked Island Bakery, it's unwrapped food, it's unpackaged, so the inspector observed that and reflected that in the code and said, these employees need to wear hair restraints per the code. On top of that, I think it really encourages best practices for the food establishment. While there might, the code even says if there's a minimal risk, they'd be required for a hair restraint. Obviously minimal risk is little risk. Even so, I think it's the best practice to wear a hair restraint, try and, practice food safety the best that you can. And last, we'd request that you deny it in order to keep a uniform standard for all establishments on the island.
I would just like to correct, it says the section does not apply to food employees such as counter staff who only serve beverages and wrap foods, and then goes on to say, and wait staff if they present a minimal risk, which means it doesn't apply to wait staff if they provide, or if they present a minimal risk. And I truly believe that our staff does not produce a heavy risk based on the way we've laid out the building, based on the fact that we are now in our 14th season. And this also only came to be last year. Last year, an inspector came into the building and approached my husband, was a bit aggressive about it, and was like, I could fine you right now for your staff not having hairnets on, no warning, anything, and was like, $100, $100, $100, $100. And our staff we were never given a warning, and it was the first it was brought to us in 2024. And I immediately came here and asked for the variance. And based on the other health inspectors we've had in the past, and also the fact that we moved into the new building after the new law took place, no one said anything and actually told us that we were okay without hair nets and hair hats and restraints. We've also were in business all these years until 2024, when suddenly it became an issue. And that, I think, is my biggest thing. I have a lot of female staff, and it comes back to the whole wait staff thing. There's an aesthetic. You don't walk in to a restaurant and everyone's got hats on. It's hot in there. I think most people can tell you that you lose a lot of your heat if you're hot through your head. And so obviously kitchen staff signs up for it. They know that. They all wear their hats. We are completely compliant in that way. I'm asking for the girls out front that they don't need to wear a hat and can keep their hair up, because we do present a minimal risk. And I think also, as I said in that picture, you've got restaurants where we have a wall, there's literally a door. And you've got restaurants that have an absolute open line. You can see that their wait staff does not have hats or hairnets or anything on, and the food is directly behind them, and the line is directly behind them.
I think last year we just said that they all had to have their hair up. Anyone who
Tied
had
back.
longer hair had to have it tied back.
Right. I guess I have a question that's just a general question. I mean, I don't see servers that bring my food in restaurants with their hair in any kind of a special restraint. And they have a plate with my dinner that I ordered right there from them. So I'm seeing some contradictions and odd things here. I think I also heard you ask for a longer, if we were to grant a variance.
Right, because we're
a
doing it
longer
every
period of
year.
time.
And
Yeah.
so the day it expired, I got an email. By the way, your variance is expired. Everybody better put hats back on. So we did. And I think July, August, I would rather be doing a lot of other things right now. And so I was asking if we're going to do it by the year while everybody thinks about it and decides to make changes. I'm asking that it be done later in the year, like November, December, that it can get us through the season. And then if you're going to do a year, like, why not 14 months? Like, that's all I'm asking. But ultimately, I would like my staff to just be classified as wait staff so that I don't have to come back every year. Because we were given the variance in case anything changed, and nothing's changed. Everything, all of these facts still exist.
Kerry has his hand up.
Yeah, I guess, we did this last year. I guess you folks put hats on or put your hair up, one or the other, right?
All the girls, they all wear their hair up. I have one young man that works for me this year. He wears a hat because his hair, it's not long enough for a pony. It's
Yeah.
curly, but he wears a hat because guys like hats. Females don't. I mean,
Well, I'm not sure if that's what we can base our decision on.
no, I know, but I'm just saying, like,
And I guess, and now in terms of hair restraints, what is I guess hats, nets, are any kind of like pullback, like the scrunchies or anything, do those count? Don't not count? I guess I want to make sure we have the full range of what a hair restraint is.
I believe it's either a hat or a hairnet. But I worked today and I was in the kitchen, so I had a hat on. But if I were to go into work and be in the front, this is what my hair is up. It's never down. My hairdresser actually gets really mad at me because she cuts my hair and I live like this. So it's never down at work. And none of my girls wear their hair down. And we've also never had a complaint about hair in food.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there's a certain, I know it was brought up last year. I think even Jim brought it up about, does this set some kind of an unenforceable precedent that in terms of dealing with all the restaurants and all the entities? And really what we're talking about is, putting a hat on or putting a hairnet on. And, that I guess that's what I'm struggling with is, does allowing this create a more complicated way to enforce regulations that really are there for the potential for causing harm?
Right. And I agree with places, again, like I said, we didn't do bagels and things like that because when you go into meat and fish, those guys are preparing your breakfast sandwiches. They're behind the counter making your drinks. They have hats on. When you go to the soda fountain, those guys are preparing food. There is absolutely no food preparation. They're not even like the trays are behind them, like you can see in that picture, and the food is here. There's almost 7 feet between that, and that my staff is standing there taking a glove or a piece of tissue paper and taking it and putting it in a bag or a box. And I think that is the minimal risk versus when you look at servers who are in the kitchen, on the line, picking up food, carrying trays or food here. I think I'm just asking for us to be viewed more as wait staff and not as the counter staff But even if you did, like I said, the General Court of Commonwealth of Massachusetts says that waitstaff is a part of a team of counter staff or any other counter employee who serves beverages or prepared food directly to the consumer. And so I guess I'm asking that the health department look at us as servers now and not, because I think that you should enforce it when someone's making your food. When you're ordering a bagel or a breakfast sandwich or something and they're making your food, though they're essentially kitchen workers, but they're out in front of you. My staff doesn't do that. My staff takes a blueberry muffin that my kitchen staff with hats on brought out on a tray, put on the rack, and they put it in a bag. So and then if you look at that other picture, you can't say that my staff poses a bigger risk than that picture that you guys are looking at. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Carrie, you can't see it, but it is an open kitchen line with staff standing in front of the pass, and there's a girl with long blonde hair standing there, and I think it's more likely that her hair is going to end up in your plate than it is my staff with their hair up who aren't even preparing, they're not even anywhere near where food is prepared.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I agree with the applicant. I think this is a good case for a variance here due to your unique model. And maybe if your setup, et cetera, was a little different, this might be a completely separate case. I also think it's for us to maybe, and see what my colleagues think, a little burdensome for you to come back in August every year. So if the board were to approve a variance, I'm a little new here, so I'm not exactly sure how protocol goes, but I was kind of thinking to myself, is there a way for when the health department does inspection, that it could be like if there were complaints or something like that,
Right.
then maybe it comes back to us to reconsider the variance. But otherwise, I'm inclined to approve this variance based on your unique model and how
Right.
you set up.
And
your
that's why we
statements today.
did that when we went into that new building, and I was very conscious about as we did the layout, because the kitchen was behind us now, and I thought, does that change everything? Because before we were at 147 Orange, the kitchen was all in one area, they brought the trays out, and it was completely separate, and I thought, is having the kitchen behind us gonna be a big deal? We actually closed a window pass, so there's just the door there, and we talked about it. My husband's first job was bagels. Meat and fish wasn't open yet. I thought about it, but I was like, now we're getting into having front of house staff handle food, cut bait, all the things that they do at Meat and Fish, and we didn't want to do that. And so that's why we've also stuck with the menu that we have and how we do it. And it's, again, it's in August, and it's after 14 years of business where it just become a thing last year is what kind of is why I'm here. Thank you.
I have a question for John.
Sure.
Carrie?
Yeah, it says packaged food, but also wrapped foods. What constitutes wrapping food? Would grabbing it with the tissue, the wax paper wrap and grabbing it, is that considered wrapped, or there's no direct contact between the counter person and the food itself?
Yeah, well, that's how it should be handled. Wrapped food would be, saran wrap, something that's already pre-made or packaged, like commercially packaged, like a loaf of bread, for instance, with a zip tie around it or something, or a twist tie. That to me is packaged or wrapped.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else on the board want to make any comments, or can we move this question, do you think? Tom, would you like to make your motion then?
I would make a motion, but I don't want to have the applicant come back in a year. So I don't want to just make up, 5 year, like that, I'm just reaching at a number
Yeah.
here. So, I'm not sure legally I can make a motion contingent on complaints, like, this is when I get out of protocol. So, I mean, maybe, John, I'm struggling a little here with a proper motion here, but maybe the thing to do would be to approve for a year, and then maybe the chair and vice chair could reschedule this for something, so we can just approve it administratively. I don't know.
Could we make it like 16 months, so it's in the winter?
So it's all,
So
Yeah, I was going to say that, or my other thought,
You
just
did
based
say
on the
that before,
paperwork
yeah.
that I brought you, was like, just consider my staff, wait staff. Because that,
I was going to say that.
because then that,
exactly.
there's no need for me to come back, because they
Reclassify.
are classified as wait staff, which is kind of always what we were told by all of the previous health inspectors and things like that. And then I don't have to come back, because if they're considered wait staff and put in the same category as wait staff, which I got this off of the, general court of, like, that's their definition of wait staff. So if we agree, or you make I don't know, like, that we are wait staff, then this goes away. And if you want to put something at the bottom that says, if we have complaints about hair issues in food, then I'll be right back here and be the first to, talk about it. But like I said, I think our track record over 14 seasons, and we're busy. So the likelihood that it would happen is
Well, I think we can do two things. I think we can approve this variance right now, today, and then meet perhaps at a less busy time of year,
yeah.
and on the question of reclassifying your people as wait staff.
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Mary, I'm going to use, to craft my motion, your suggestion. I think that's excellent. So I would make a motion to approve this variance for 16 months.
Yeah, what is that? August, September, October, November, yeah, January.
Okay.
And we usually do a big clean and a deep pull and do all of our fix-it projects. And, we have a bubble in our floor that they want fixed. And I've already talked to Chris McGarvey. They're coming in and fixing it and patching it the minute we close. So that would enable us to, if there's things we need to address, like, we usually close for several weeks and do all that, so.
Okay, approve the variance for 16 months to come back, and at that time, as an agenda item, we will discuss whether your staff is in fact wait staff or not, and adjudicate that at the time. Does that work for the board?
Can I propose a modification possibly? I'm not comfortable with the 16-month thing. I would just say 1 year, and in this intervening year, we sit down and figure out, are they wait staff? I guess that, they're going to get inspected, as they should, every year.
Right.
And it's going to come up until it's either going to become, we're going to give routine variances and say, okay, yeah, we know what it is, go ahead. Or we can use this time between now and next August to really, are they wait staff or not? And just come up with the determination. We can possibly solve it in a 1 year cycle, not a 16-month cycle.
Could we say September then? Can it be 13 months? Because by that point,
The motion would be approve the variance for 1 year, and in the course of this year, Wicked Island Bakery and the Department of Health will meet to kind of see if we are, if they are considered wait staff, or if not, to potentially come to a determination, are they wait staff or not? And that way, that will determine our future action. If it's not, they'll come back every year, but we'll probably keep approving it because things are good. Not going to wait for complaints. And if they're wait staff, it's a moot point.
Carrie, what's wrong with 16 months?
They're going to get inspected in the interim anyways, and it just seems I think actually it gets we had a request a couple months ago about something, and there was a really brief discussion of can the variance last more than a year, and we said no. I mean I've been a restaurant related, but it's just that the variance is good for a year. That's my understanding.
Madam Chair, how about this? How about accept Carrie's friendly amendment for a year, and we just take it up in January?
that's fine. I mean, I can come back in
And-
January this year if you want, and we can sit down and meet, like,
All right,
If that, I mean, if it can only be a year, then it can only be a year,
Process-
and then, yeah.
okay.
Process-wise, is that,
Yeah. I mean, that's,
It will be an agenda item in January of 2026. Is that correct? Is that what
that's what I'm thinking out
Okay.
loud.
All right, good. Go
and
ahead.
they would be able to talk to the, people at the health department, prior to that about, so we can kind of maybe come in with both sides, like have a absolute cleaner definition of, are we on track for wait staff consideration or not?
Carrie, I agree. I think those are good points on the year, and a friendly amendment accepted. So I'd make a motion to accept the variance for 1 year, and to have this item re-agended in January or thereabouts, depending on the board's agenda and availability of the applicant.
Is that the motion?
Second? Is there a second?
Yeah.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Jim? Meredith?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Ann? Yes. All right, that one,
Thank
we have a variance. Oh, boy. 13 Woodland Drive, that's number 8 on the
Madam
agenda.
Chair?
Yes.
May I make a suggestion? If there's nobody waiting for the next couple applicants, I think there are some folks here waiting for 11 and 12.
that's- yes.
Before we get into dinner time and all that.
You'd like to delay
Yeah,
those two? Yeah,
with the chair's approval, maybe move to,
yeah, sure. How about if we go then on to number 11 on the agenda?
Sorry, Madam Chair, Dan Malloy had his hand raised. I'm not sure. He was the next agenda item. I don't know.
he might be waiting.
Yes, go ahead. Dan?
Good afternoon. Just very quickly, I just want to let you know we're going to be requesting a continuance for 13 Woodland Drive to the September meeting.
Okay.
That makes it easier for
That's
you. All
helpful. Thank you.
right, thank you.
All right. So I think that means that we can go on to number 11.
Well, should we vote on the continuance just to get that out of the way? Just make a motion to 13 Woodlands Drive to be continued at the September meeting and vote on it and put it away?
Does that need a vote?
I think so.
I think
second
you should,
that.
just to be safe, per the applicant's request.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the applicant's request, continued until the September meeting.
You already seconded.
Here to second it, okay. Tom?
Aye.
And I.
Give that motion again, please.
There's a motion for 13 Woodland Drive to be continued until September 25.
Okay. Yes.
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 Carrie?
Yes.
Ann? Yes. All right, that is continued. Okay, we are on number 11. We're coming back to number 9 and number 10. And number 11 is STR enforcement discussion. Actually, interestingly enough, number 12 is rental inspection discussion. So to me, those two things, you can't have enforcement until you have inspection. So are they possibly reversed?
Madam Chair, if I could, so
go ahead.
this agenda item was put on last month due to a request from the board, and it was in reference to routine inspections or ongoing inspections for properties that go beyond STRs, so even the long-term rental inspection process. And that's what that agenda item is.
Okay, I still think maybe if we could understand rental inspection, it would help us with STR enforcement. But I'm certainly okay with going in order, so STR enforcement is the next item.
Yes, that's
Go ahead.
good.
Hi, Dave Iverson, speaking as a citizen, not as a board member for anyone I serve on. I'm just standing up to request or to ask the board to request town council to craft a letter to the platforms to urge them to follow our local bylaws in displaying the local registry number on their ads. I think it would be greatly helpful for you all with enforcement, and that is the law that we passed. So, thank you.
I also think, I don't think there is any enforcement right now, and it sounds like there aren't inspections, so it is under our purview. I think that Mr. Iverson's suggestion is excellent, because I do think that is part of the issue. Is there's a lot of people, as we heard at public comment, that don't have their registration and are having difficulty getting it.
So if I may,
Yeah.
so I first just want to say that the health department will enforce any Board of Health regulation and/or state regulation as it pertains to health to the level of our expertise and our resources to do so. That's always been the case. As far as short-term rental enforcement, that is really how, if we were defining enforcement, initially, this came about as a result of making sure the properties were registered. And so at the end of last year, I believe it was October, we had approximately 150 or 160 registered properties. And what we didn't understand was who the short-term renter owners, property owners were, or any information about them. So the goal initially was to improve compliance enforcement to get people registered. And so that is what we have been focused on. And so after working with the contractor with some barriers that came up around registration, we greatly improved that process. And so the point that we do have, we went from 150 or so to 1,347. So now we know much more about each short-term rental property owner, who they are, how to contact them. Their Chapter 338 has requirements around quarterly electronic reporting, and this is information that we're starting to ask for now, including the listing, location, type of rental, number of nights occupied, and operators' contact information. There's additional information that we can ask for upon request. I should say we can ask for that. You can ask the owner as needed, and there's more information there, including number of nights rented, number of guests, including the type of rental, dates, number of vehicles, income derived. All this is in 338 and falls under the Board of Health and certainly something that we can ask for and that we will try and that we will definitely do an audit for the existing product and start asking for this information. Also, as part of the renewal process, which is due October the 31st, we will be asking for an attestation that all the rules were followed that are in 338 for the prior year. That is part of the registration and the re-registration process. And again, I think the advantage here is that we have all the information now and can reach these property owners more quickly. There is, in reference to the inspections, I think what I was referring to in the questions that came up earlier was routine inspections or yearly inspections. If it is a housing complaint, the health department will go. It doesn't matter what type of complaint or house it is. If it's a short-term rental, long-term rental, owner occupied. If there's a housing complaint, the health department will respond. This was in reference to routine inspections or yearly inspections, and that clearly does not fall into 338. That is part of the housing code and the responsibility of the property owner to request those inspections. We just, it also mentioned earlier in the responses that we're in the final stages of hiring a short-term rental coordinator whose primary focus initially will be that registration system. It takes a lot more time on the registration system than people realize. I spend a considerable amount of time, or have over the last year, on that system, as has people within the health department. It is an ongoing question and answer session with individuals, which we're happy to do because it falls under wanting to make sure that people are complying, getting their properties registered, and following the rules associated with owning a short-term rental on the island. And so once we hire this person, they will be doing a complete audit of the system. They will be gunning the forms that I talked about regarding attestation, as well as ensuring that additional rules are followed, things like properties that cannot be owned by a corporation. So we can see that in certain areas, and we have turned those properties down and did it as little as a week or two ago. So we can look at things now because we have information on these short-term rental community owners. We didn't back in October. And so to say we're not enforcing something is not accurate because we have been enforcing.
That was not a dig at you all. I think that have a small department, and this is a huge undertaking. I think you guys are doing everything you can do. I think that has been a very hard thing to do from the beginning. And I think having 1,357 is amazing. I think that there hasn't been, I think there are a lot of organizations on island that could be doing a good job making sure all of the places are registered and have their information on their websites, all of the realtors. Like, I think that doesn't fall under you. I was not saying that you guys are not doing a wonderful job, because I think you guys have a lot on your plate.
Thank
in
you.
addition to all of this.
Thank you. And it is true that the registration number is supposed to be per the regulation in all these advertisements. However, according to legal counsel, our relationship is with the property owner, and that's who we would have to change, or it would be required to change 338 to include enforcement with realtors. And I will say about the realtors, they've been incredibly cooperative. They want to help. To a person that I've spoken to, they respond. They speak to us when we need their help. I send them lists, and that's another thing that we've done around enforcement. Is we're able to scrape data, so we've written some code, some computer code that enables us to look at all the listings that are on the island for short-term rentals. And in that same system, we can compare that list of current rentals against our list of registrations. And I can say that we are not that far away from being able to capture most of the short-term rentals that are being listed from week to week. Now, it's not 100%, and there's still maybe some areas that we might be missing some, but we have come a long way in that area, and the realtors have been great about it.
Hi, sorry, David Iverson again. Rocky, that was not an attack on you if you thought it was, because like Mary said, I think you guys are doing a great job. I just have concerns, and I think that you address them, is that the platforms, and when I say platforms, I don't mean the local realtors, I mean Airbnb, VBRO, and those guys. I think we're missing a chunk, and not because of anything you guys have done. I think you guys have done great work so far, but I think we need to figure out how to reel them into this, because they aren't complying, and we don't even know if they're registering. So maybe we can put our heads together and figure out how to do that. If it's not written into the bylaw now, we need to figure out how to bring those guys into the loop. And again, this was not a shot at the board or at you, Rocky, because I think you're doing a great job. I just want to close the loop on those rentals we're missing. Thank you.
We have someone with their hand up. Our
Catherine Ward?
Yes, I just have a question, and it sounds like that Rocky's got a system going where he can capture those who have a Nantucket registration versus those who are advertising. But clearly this year, there was not that match, being able to take a look at this and see who was renting without a registration or permit from Nantucket. So my bottom line question is, were there any fines levied now that you know that people did rent without the Nantucket registration and it was not that complicated to do?
Through you, Madam Chair. So when we were presented to the select board last year and a policy was written, we agreed to extend, or I should say the select board and the Board of Health agreed to extend the registration deadline to capture those that have not registered yet, and partially because the system was not functioning well at that time. And so we have not fined yet, based on the lack of registration, because we are capturing initial registration. Everybody is an initial right now, but that is certainly something that falls within the capabilities of 338, and with far more attention that will be applied to it now that we will have a dedicated person for that. We will move in that direction. We understand the importance of enforcement and of compliance, and we want to ensure that we are meeting our obligations in that respect.
May I ask a question of these two comments? Are you asking for the public to notify the health department, your new employee, if they are aware of a dwelling that is being rented without any kind of registration or permission? Because I don't think you're always aware of who they are, or where they are, or what they are.
Yes, so I will say that we are always willing to speak to anyone in the public. That's what we're here for. We're here as a public health department to serve the good people of Nantucket, and we're always willing to speak on any topic. We have that dedicated person, dedicated way to reach out. And I will say that as far as the reason that we haven't had a complaint, that we actually did an housing complaint inspection as a result of a short-term rental, is because those would come from people that were actually in the rental and not from people that were neighbors or abutters. But the complaints that we have received were from the neighbors and abutters, and not from those that were actually renting. But always willing to talk, and we'll always will act on any information, particularly as it complains to a housing complaint. Obviously, noise complaints, parking complaints, those go to the police department. They are also in 338 an agent of the Board of Health, and will respond to those.
and lack of registration complaints. You need to know that.
They would have to know that their person is not registered, but I don't know how that would occur, but it certainly, we would look it up if there was a question around whether something was a short-term rental that was registered.
Yeah, I think there was a request that there be a certificate posted.
That's inside the house.
Right.
So unless you have access to inside the house, you wouldn't know.
Would you like to speak?
I guess, maybe.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Charity Benz. It's an interesting discussion, and I would like to encourage the board to consider what Mr. Iverson suggested about platforms being put on notice that they're required to register with Nantucket. 338.5C says specifically, advertising a short-term rental. All advertisements for short-term rentals, whether online or at a real estate agency, shall include the operator's certificate of registration number and shall be consistent with the short-term rental information provided in the application to the town. And we have a problem. Just take Airbnb and VRBO, because our group, Nantucket Neighborhoods First, has looked at these platforms. Both of them advertise more than 800 rentals on Nantucket. And from a health department standpoint, perhaps you're all aware of the case in New York where an Airbnb claimed to have had a fire smoke alarm and did not, and 2 people died in that fire, a mother and her daughter, and the husband and son were able to escape. So this registration is not just about collecting money and that sort of thing. It is about being sure that those properties are safe to rent. And one thing we know about our real estate people here, they are scrupulous, they follow the rules, and they try to anyway. And they are doing the best they possibly can to be sure that their clients are registered. Some of them are even removing non-registered properties from their listings. So we know those people. What we don't know is what's going on with all the people who are not registered, who are not making the attestation that they have all of these. And we're an island. We know who these people are. And so I would certainly recommend that a simple gesture to be able to start getting compliance, even picking up a little money for the town, would be to have our town, through council possibly, put all of these platforms on notice that it is a requirement to advertise on Nantucket that the owner of the property have a Nantucket short-term rental registration. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I did talk to a few people over the last couple days as this has been an agenda item about certain things. And I'm not going to opine on the merits of what I'm about to say, but just in general, that rentals 14 days and under do not need a certificate from the town, and rentals 31 days or more do not need. And some of those rentals that are on platforms, et cetera, are part of that universe of numbers. And we or whoever can have a discussion about whether that needs, because we need data or whatever, but I think that's one of those things out there. I understand folks do something like they'll put their home on a platform, whatever, Airbnb, local, whatever, and they'll only rent for 2 weeks, but they'll put up the whole summer and then only end up so they can kind of choose what 2 weeks they want, what's best, works best for them. So I think there are uniquenesses, right? I think it's more important for us, for Nantucket, to know the usage and what all the things we're trying to do with other short-term rental. Sorry. I lost my train of thought. But I'll leave it there. I think those are important things to look at, and that may be something that we can gather more testimony if we consider putting forth changes to 338 or whatever in the future, or whatever comes out of our meetings.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I forgot to mention that the owners of that property, the husband and the wife, are now serving 2 years in jail.
Can I say something through you? I think what Charity said is super important for us to remember, because I do think that at some point the STR discussion sort of gets into this is a witch hunt, or not what really is behind it, because there is now a child that has no mother and a husband who has no wife, because this was advertised and not done properly. And I do think that's why this was all put out there, because there were some health department calls where they went to homes that were short-term rental that the people did not, there was a fire, I think, and the people didn't know how to get out. There was some issue, and the person staying there did not know how to get out. I remember Roberto discussing this. And so I think we do have to remember this. And I think what they've said is very important about sending it out to all of the sending something to the platforms and sending it out, because there are homes that are leased. The owner leases it for the season to a organization or a company who then rents it by the night. So that is still a short-term rental, even if the owner thinks they're leasing it to a company. That's sort of how they're getting around our regulations. And so that sort of might need to be addressed as well.
I have,
Curtis
just want to
Barnes.
say one thing.
Sorry?
Yeah,
The
Jim, go
job
ahead.
of the health department is the health and welfare of the people of Nantucket. We're being forced into a position that we have no right being in. That's the way I'm going to leave it. We have no right being put in a position like this to be enforcing things. We can't physically enforce them. We'd have to turn to the health department to do our work. Anything that's wrong for the health and welfare of the Nantucket people, that's what our job is for. I wouldn't care if there was ever rentals. This should have nothing to do with the health department, the rental part of this. None.
Except, Jim, that safety, fire safety is having to do with health
If
and
it has
welfare.
something to do with the health and well-being of a Nantucket person or some person, that's one thing.
Yeah,
But it shouldn't have anything to do with the fire department. It shouldn't have anything to do with the police department. It shouldn't have anything to do with, if it's something like that, they should call, someone else should be calling the police department. Someone else should be calling the fire department. They shouldn't be calling the health department.
Curtis.
Curtis Barnes. Charity brought up a point that I think is very important. That fire that killed the kids did not have smoke detectors, but there was no inspection to see that they had them. Now, I had a house in Yarmouth for 10 years, and to register, I walked into the health department. I signed, back then they had paper. I signed the piece of paper. I gave them an $80 fee, which is their charge. And then they scheduled an initial appointment to come to my rental property and make sure that the exits were all there and everything was fine. And as a builder, I was in pretty good shape. But the fact of the matter is, right now, there is no inspection to make sure that a property qualifies under our regulations. And I know you can't inspect everyone, But the fact of the matter is, that's the hole in the system. That's the missing link. That how do you know there are smokies in there? And so I think that's something that in the long term has to be looked at very carefully. Thank you.
My turn?
Yeah.
Hi, Ann Duez. I just wanted to reinforce the concept of employing the people who benefit from the short-term rentals in the process of making them legal. The real estate agents, many are being very helpful by taking properties off their websites because they aren't registered. The platforms don't even know that we have this requirement on Nantucket. Nobody's ever told them. People in our group who've asked their platform representatives or contacts, did you know that Nantucket has a registration process and nobody can advertise their properties, theoretically, without including their registration number? And they say, no, we are completely unaware of this requirement. So it seems to me logical to take some burden off of the health department by encouraging, in the strongest possible terms, the people who are benefiting from the short-term rentals through their advertising platforms, be they local brokers or the platforms themselves, to be more diligent about refusing to advertise properties that aren't registered. The corollary is that if people are not able to advertise, I think they'll make a much bigger effort to register. And then we have a more vibrant registration process, better information because our universe is more complete, and more revenue for the town through the registration fees. So I would strongly encourage you to reach out and continue to encourage our local brokers in this endeavor, and to take up David Iverson's excellent proposal to, at a minimum, through the appropriate channels, could be town council, could be town manager, could be the head of the select board, I don't know, but to put these people on notice that we have this rule and regulation, and we'd like their cooperation in enforcing it. And anecdotal evidence that we have from other municipalities is that when you do reach out to these platforms, they can actually be quite cooperative, and they will provide information if you ask for it. So I think that there's an untapped resource here, and I hope that we can tap into it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, two comments. I remember what I was going to say before, which will be my second comment. And on Ms. Benz and Ms. Duez's comments, I think that's a perfectly reasonable idea, and Mr. Iverson's comments, perfectly reasonable idea to send to ask town council. I don't know legally what Airbnb, it's all what they can and can't do. But I don't see there's any reason why, unless there's some reason the town council advises or et cetera, that we can't do that. So I think that's a good idea. Second, what I was going to mention before is there is a bill in the legislature right now called the Maggie Hubbard Rental Safety Act, H3962. It's in committee. And what that does is mandate Commonwealth-wide annual inspections of smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors done through local fire departments. And our state senator, Julian Sear, and our state rep, Thomas Moakley, are both co-sponsors of that. And so that's moving through the legislature. So that may become a thing statewide.
Can I ask a question? Rocky, is the new person somebody who lives on island, or are they going to be just coming down once a month?
They'll be primarily.
You have two hands
Yeah.
online.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think Kathy was first.
Okay. Kathy Baird?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, Sorry, I was in a restaurant and I had to just jump outside. So this is Kathy Baird. I just wanted to address the comment that, very good comment that Andrew has made. And just assure everybody here, Nantucket Together has been in touch with the platforms for years to coordinate work with them. They are very well aware of Nantucket's regulations. And I don't know who you spoke with, but there are people who are regionally assigned, and those people who are regionally assigned in those platforms to the Massachusetts area, for example, they're aware of the changes and rules. So there are ways to post all of this information, and anybody who is on Airbnb or VRBO can do that very easily. Right now, they're putting a campaign together to notify all of their Nantucket hosts that that is the requirement, that they must register and that they must display their registration number on the platform. So we haven't taken the step of delisting it if they don't have that yet, but they are making sure that everybody is aware that they must register and have that information on their listing. Just wanted to let everybody know that what's going on. That's been an endeavor for us for a while to make sure that people are. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there someone else? Rebecca?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear me okay?
we can.
Thank you. So I second what's been said about facilitating the process as, part of the community with Kathy Baird and others of responsible short-term rental operators, owners. The easier it can be made for us to comply fully with these regulations and make our registration numbers visible, better for everyone. I wanted to go back, if I may, to a point Rocky was making earlier. First of all, I was really excited to hear that some applicants for registration have been rejected because their ownership structure violated the town's bylaws. And going back to at the June 4th select board meeting, I proposed that some more specific language be added to the registration application process, not simply to stop at the registrant attesting that they had complied with all relevant laws and regulations and such, but actually asking very detailed questions about if it was a corporation, LLC, and so forth, the ownership structure, and getting down to the level of detail that would reduce the burden on the health department to suss out whether in fact the applicant was an entity or owner, corporation, and so forth, that was not legally entitled to operate an SCR in Nantucket. So I might point back to that and I can resend that if it's helpful to you. But I think it also would be really beneficial to the community because all of us, whether we are short-term rental operators or those who are concerned about short-term rental operation on Nantucket, agree that there are classes of owners that should not be allowed per the law that's been passed to operate short-term rentals. And it would be great to see that that's being enforced because unless somebody's sitting here in this meeting, they don't have visibility of that. So I just encourage the extent that you can publicize that without overly burdening yourselves. I think it would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I say one more thing? Sure. I think that was very interesting to hear from Kathy Baird that they had reached out to Airbnb and some of the platforms. But I have to say that a letter from the town council of the island of Nantucket would have far more force and effect. And I would urge the encouragement of that to motivate them to do what they say they will do. And they may not have said when. Thank you.
What I think I'm hearing are a lot of wonderful points have been made. And a lot of things that need to be done to make the use of short-term rentals safe. This has nothing to do with who gets to short-term rent and all of that other controversy, but this has to do with making them safe. And it sounds to me like one of the problems is the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And we have a lot of different or agencies who could potentially be involved here. And I think what I'm hearing, I don't know what the rest of you think, is that this may be a meeting, a special meeting that we schedule with some of the other agencies that could be involved, the fire department and the building department and all of those things, even our legal counsel, to see, because it's very clear that unless there is some kind of pushback, if you can always get away with it, you're always going to do it. And so I don't know whether that sounds like a good idea to everybody, but I'm not sure we can solve it here tonight. And so I think we maybe need to figure out what are the things that need to be accomplished and who will do them. Hello?
Oh, I just didn't want to interrupt you, Kit Murphy. I just, yes, there have been a lot of different proposals, ideas, what have you, floated out here tonight, but I'd hate to have the Board of Health lose sight of what I thought was David Iverson's tremendously fabulous suggestion. And I don't say that often about things that David has to say. No, I'm just kidding. I would just like to reiterate, I think it's important that town council contact the large rental platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, and if Kathy Baird and Nantucket together have good contacts there, I don't see why they couldn't provide those contacts to Tom Dixon and no, I'm sorry, Tom. I thought it was you.
I want as much less to do with STRs than that.
Okay, no, I thought it was you who thought that John Giorgio should be contacted. In any event, I would love it if Kathy and the folks at Nantucket together shared that information with John Giorgio, if and when he's asked to write a letter to the platforms. But I really don't want to see that idea lost in all the other ideas. For one, because it's not fair to our local realtors who are complying with our rules and regulations and have started cleaning up their websites, listing the Nantucket STR registration numbers, and are doing a very good job of deleting non-registered STRs from their sites. They're doing what's been asked. And I just don't get why it seems like it would take a lot to get John Giorgio to write a letter. That's it. Although I know John's letters don't come free.
Madam Chair, I don't hear any pushback from doing that at all. I highly support it. My only comments, and not that Kit was singling me out, was just, I don't know what's possible. I don't know, town councils can send letters. These are big corporations. They may, and they may not have who knows? So I just don't want to give false expectations that a letter from town council is going to suddenly solve it. And also all those two specific instances with 14 days and under and 31 days, there might be some specific interest but we may do this and then there might be rentals out there and people will say, then we're constantly whack-a-mole. So anyway, but I completely support through staff, of course, not through me, doing that.
Is there any more discussion on number 11 and number 12, the enforcement or the inspection? Because if not, I think before we take up the variances, the two variances, maybe we should go on to the fee schedule update, which will be the opening of a public hearing, as I understand it.
Madam Chair, I guess, this is less about the short-term rentals and more about the rental inspection. If I remember a couple of months ago when we brought it up, I think Curtis brought it up in a couple of meetings, that the rental inspection really was not so much on the short-term rentals, but for the yearly rentals. And we had a brief discussion as a board about it's probably a topic we don't want to address because it really is going to be about contentious probably. But if the complaints that the health department gets, and many times we've had to act on either condemning a place or whatever, are from the year-round rentals. So I think the rental inspection discussion was about not just short-term rentals, but throwing open the topic of inspection of year-round rentals.
Yes, I agree, but I think that it was made very clear to us that the health department does not do routine inspections. Only in the case if a complaint or an issue is brought to them.
Right. No, I'm agreeing, but that was a part of that whole discussion. And again, it's almost like a short-term rental. There's some things that really aren't our responsibility directly, but we are on the edge of a lot of discussions and do play a role in it. And if it impacts the public health of the citizens of Nantucket, we at least should be at the table. So just wanted to get that out there.
Madam Chair, since I was invoked in that, my recommendation or request was not that you inspect, but you register long-term rentals. You've got to register long-term as well as short-term because the long-terms are where our problems are. So it was, again, registration, not inspection was my suggestion.
I'm back. May I respectfully ask that you make a motion to continue this discussion, to include some of the suggestions that were made here and bring some of your recommendations into fruition, so that, we can come to some level playing field here between our responsible realtors who are doing things right and trying to bring other realtors, other STR owners who are probably doing things right, but not registered, into compliance. And once I think Rocky gets that kind of a list, managing is going to be a rather straightforward matter. Thanks.
Madam Chair, closing comment on this item. Rocky, I think that it's been a long time coming to stand up the registry, and I know there were some serious issues with the vendor and all that and getting the software correctly, but it seems like getting there with the universe of so I think that's very promising, and I think the new staff member is great. In the memo that you wrote that is in our packet, which is the update on the public comment, I think it's very interesting, and I think I implore the public to take a look at it, because I think one would be surprised by kind of what's out there in the ether about complaints and et cetera. The complaint numbers were extremely low, and as I understand it, any noise, parking, trash, et cetera, would go to the police. They would deal with that. That would be separate, but and that the fees are coming in for the 1347. That's great, and I know that in Massachusetts state law that the fee must be commensurate with what it costs to run the program, and so it's self-supportive for the budget and all that, and Anyway, I guess my point is to take for folks to look at this memo, because I think it is illustrative on what purview you've been hearing about it, what the kind of status is of complaints, et cetera.
Okay, I think this is important to sort of collate all the thoughts tonight and put them together and see some of the things that people have suggested should be done, could be done, and then figure out who doesn't. So we'll move on. Did we want to go on to the conversation about fee schedule update?
Madam Chair, if I might, just out of respect to Mr. Bracken and his clients, if you want to take up those 2 agenda items.
Okay. Then we will go back to numbers 8.
Number 9. Number 9 and 10.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Numbers 9 and 10.
Okay. This is 12 Baltimore, correct?
Number 9 is 12 Baltimore, correct.
Don, I don't know if you want to talk on this or. Oh, yeah, there he is. All right, you're good.
Before he starts, I thought we were still under a moratorium until the 18th of September.
That is correct. This is 12 Baltimore Street, which is in Nantucket.
I thought we were on a moratorium for all variances.
This is an upgrade.
I'm sorry. It says variance request, that's why.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
Don.
thank you. I guess my camera's not working again, but for the applicant, Don Bracken, Bracken Engineering, representing the applicant. This is, as John said, this is an upgrade in order to accommodate proposed construction on the property. Currently, there's a 2-bedroom main house and a 1-bedroom cottage on this property with a 3-bedroom septic system that consists of a 1,000-gallon septic tank and leaching pit. What we're proposing to do is reconstruct and relocate the 2-bedroom dwelling and raise and rebuild the 1-bedroom cottage. In order to do that, we're going to put in a new Title V system, which will include a septic tech denitrification system and this, standard soil absorption system located pretty close to where the existing leaching pit is. As we know, Nantucket has much more stringent requirements than the rest of the town, so we're asking for several waivers for the upgrade from the Nantucket regulations for property lines and well setbacks. Although there is town water in this area, there are still several properties listed in the variance letter that have wells. There are 4 wells in the area altogether. 3 of the wells, we meet the 100-foot minimum state requirement. 1 well across Baltimore Street from us, which is 2 Tennessee Ave, we can only be 62 feet away from that well. And I'll get back to that in a second. So same thing with property lines. The Nantucket regulation is a 50-foot setback. We're asking for 2 setback reliefs. One is 10.5 feet from 3A Street, which if you look at the plan, they actually have they got a variance up to 1 feet from our own lot line. So, it's probably typical, most of these small lots in Nantucket requiring that relief. This lot's only 11,510 square feet. Another local upgrade variance we're asking for is the 300-foot setback for nitrogen sensitive areas, which Nantucket Harbor is designated as. The proposed new soil absorption system will be 203 feet. So back to the 2 Tennessee Ave, all the other variance relief are all local regulations. We are asking for a Title V relief. And technically in Title V, it's not even a variance. It's trying to meet maximum feasible upgrade. Title V does allow you to go within 50 feet if you have no other alternatives, which in this case, we really don't. The existing system is about the same distance from that well. Coincidentally, we did the septic design for 2 Tennessee back in 2021, which has yet to be upgraded. And that was approved contingent upon that property tying into town water. As stated in our request, we feel that it's justified. This will be a major improvement over what's there today, along with no actual increase in flows. And eventually, we assume 2 Tennessee will be connected to town water as it was directed to be in 2021. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Carrie, here. So the 2 Tennessee isn't connected yet to town water, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but they are under a expectation that that should be done.
Yes, that was a condition in 2021. So I assume that they're on Sean's list to get going on that upgrade. It should have been done, obviously, years ago.
Okay. And would it be unreasonable to do what we've done with many other properties, especially in some of these sensitive areas, is to put a deed restriction on the number of bedrooms?
Yeah, we have no problem with that. We sort of expected that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments from the
What do you
board?
say?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes,
I agree
John.
with Don. There's a little bit of reconfiguring going on with the lot, but I think the deed restriction is a good suggestion. And, again, as I said, there's kind of some reconfiguration going on. Sometimes I have to look at these as if this was simply just a failed system and he was proposing to upgrade this and as a repair. And as I see it, the way that it is, it's, maybe there's room to move it a foot here or there, but otherwise the technology's way better, the treatment's way better. So more or less, this is the best scenario.
So the department is in favor of,
Yes, yep.
okay? Do we have a motion to approve this?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Well, can we make a motion to approve with the deed restriction? 3-bedroom?
With a deed restriction, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Anne? Yes. That passes unanimously. Make sure it has the deed restriction. All right, and then the other, I believe, is 113 Hummock.
Yes, if I may, Don Bracken again, representing the owners, Mary Jo and Bill Buckland, who I believe are on the meeting as well and may want to speak. This one is pretty complicated, so I'll try to take you through this step by step. So this property has a history. We were in front of the Board of Health back in 2020 asking for basically the same variances that we're asking for now. We think circumstances have changed somewhat and hope the Board of Health will reconsider what the previous Board of Health, when they denied it. So the property has an existing septic system. It's a post-1995 system. As you probably know, all the regulations for Title V changed in 1995, and basically went from leaching pits to shallow soil absorption systems. But also at that time, in 1995, when they changed the regulations, they defined more clearly how to determine groundwater elevations or groundwater levels through the soil evaluation process. Required all of us to get certified in it and trained in it. Well, on this property, a soil evaluation was done in 1996 after the new regulations. In 1997, septic system was designed and approved. And at that time, they also got a variance to the wetland setback, which is one of the variances we're asking for as well. So that system, after it was installed, inspected, it was granted a certificate of compliance in 2002. Then fast forward to 2017, the property went into foreclosure. The bank took it over. They had a septic system inspection done at that time, and it failed the inspection due to what they found at that time to be the groundwater depth. So the groundwater depth that we look at is there are two types of groundwater on Nantucket that we usually encounter. One is, the static groundwater where the water level sits inside the aquifer, usually the sand aquifer. And that's pretty easy to recognize and easy to measure, when you do a test hole. On this particular site, I went back in 2020 and did another soil test pit with the Board of Health, and we didn't encounter any groundwater, I think down to about 13 or 14 feet. We're able to measure the actual static groundwater in the aquifer in the well, which ends up being almost 20 feet below where we're currently designing the bottom of the soil absorption system. So the other groundwater that we have to consider is, what we call a perched groundwater level. This is water that infiltrates through the surface, through the topsoil and subsoil. It may go through sand layers or other layers, but when it hits an impervious or almost impervious soil layer, the water sits on top of that soil layer for a period of time, and it saturates the top layer of that soil, which is the case here. In this case, we don't call it clay, but I'll call it a clay layer because that's what it's known as. We have a clay layer below the top and subsoil that runs about 6 to 8 feet deep. And so sitting on top of that clay layer, we have a perched water table. And if you look at the soil logs, and I know you've looked at plenty of plans, but you'll see in those logs that perched water table is located by signs that we see in the soil called redox or models, which is what we have in this case. And so those show up about 20 inches below the ground. So again, we have two water tables. We have this perched water table, and we have this actual water table. And sort of just to put things in perspective, the system that was put in, that's there and approved in certificate of compliance in 2002, that's pretty close to being in or on top of this perched water table. Again, with this water table is there by definition. If you were to dig a hole there, as we did in February 2020, when the water table is usually near its highest, there's no weeping, there's no water coming into the hole. And and in this case, it has not impacted and wouldn't impact the system that's there, which still functions. It's not in hydraulic failure. It failed because of the groundwater separations to this designated perched water table. Also to note, the house has a full basement because the bottom of the basement is below that sand layer that's dry and where there is no water table. So, but we still have to deal with this perched water table. So we asked for a variance in 2020 for that was denied. The owners, took it at that point. We we sent the plan out for estimates, and it was extremely expensive. They got a letter recently from the Board of Health, to get going and upgrade the system. So they reached out to all the installers on the island, and they ended up only getting one cost back, and that was $188,000 for the system. And that's a system without the variance that we're asking for. So what we're asking for is a variance to be 3 feet above this perch water table rather than the 5 feet that the town requires under its local regulations. Now, Title V allows us for an upgrade, which this is considered because we're not proposing any new construction or we're not proposing any additional flow. But in reality, if we had to go the 5 feet, then we would need retaining walls. We would have to create a large mound in the front of the yard. If we can get the variance to 3 feet, we would need the retaining walls. We would still have a mound. It would be about 18 inches high rather than 3.5 feet high with retaining walls. And we really don't gain anything as far as treatment, because the groundwater that's at issue is the static groundwater that's going to be almost 20 feet below where the system is going to go. So we're asking for that relief. We think it's reasonable. Title V does allow the Board of Health to consider financial considerations, and we think if we can get the variance, add the treatment, we're maximizing the treatment with the septic tech system. We're also putting in a pressure dispersal system. As we know from your last meeting with George Ufelder, is the best soil absorption system that you can propose and treats the effluent the best. Also to note, the existing well that's on the property, which is down gradient, groundwater flow direction from where the existing system is, has never tested high on any nitrogen. I think it's at 0.5 parts per million. I think that the proof right there that there's even with the existing system that's there, that there's not going to be any further degradation to the environment or the groundwater. I think with that, I'm sure you'll have other questions, but I think Mr. and Mrs. Buckland would probably like to say something at this point if it's okay with the board.
Sure.
Go ahead. Mrs. Buckland?
I think she's on mute.
Hello?
Yep.
Hello.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Mary Jo Buckland, co-owner with my husband Bill Buckland of this 113 Hummock Pond Road house on Nantucket. After we received your letter this past June, we immediately called and spoke with Sean Reed in your office and explained we really didn't know how mandatory this upgrade was immediately, and we were going to cooperate. And we contacted every approved septic contractor on Nantucket, over 10 in total. And so far, as Mr. Bracken said, we've received one response, a proposal for $188,000. That does not even include the additional costs for Mr. Bracken's services. And this leaves us in this difficult position. The sewer line right now is only 1 block away from our home. And it's within 5 years, I think it's pretty likely it's going to reach our area, which means we will have to abandon this new system. Yet we would still be paying for it for another 15 years. That's a lot of money for us. You know, we are retired senior citizens. We have invested all of our retirement savings here into this house. We do rent it in the summer to help cover expenses, but from September to June, it's our home and a place we've dreamed of enjoying during our retirement years. When we bought the property, it was one of the biggest eyesores on Nantucket. Any of you who maybe lived around before 2017 might remember it. It had spinning pinwheels and bathtubs and garbage, and we had to clean all that out. And we were proud to do so. And the yard is now beautiful. It's taken us over 5 years to clean it all out. And now, when we think about if we're required to put up this wall, we would be faced with walking out of our front door just to see, just 6 feet away, a structure rising to our waistline or higher, and across the entire front yard and up our driveway. It's impossible to imagine, what that's going to look like. We're asking you to please consider granting us this variance. We simply want to preserve the beauty of our home and the neighborhood and to continue enjoying the home we've worked so hard to restore. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, if I could just add too, this area is in the North Hummock Pond sewer needs area that's been identified. I'm not sure it was when we came in last time to ask for the variance, whether it had made it that far. The town hasn't started actually designing anything in that area, but I believe it's next on the list, as Mary Jo had said. I think the other thing that should be considered here is, if they can reduce the cost by $30,000, that's $30,000 more that will be in the loan program, for other people to take advantage of. And I know I said a lot the first time, but I think I'll close by just saying again, in my professional opinion, not granting the variance doesn't gain any environmental benefit than giving the variance.
You want to say anything? Okay.
Well, I don't know if I can.
You don't have a hand, do you? It's okay if you don't. So that's it.
Ms. Buckland, you may want to mute. Thank you. Madam Chair, a question through you to Mr. Bracken. Mr. Bracken, in our packet is the staff recommended approval for 79-foot setback and denying the 3-foot separation to groundwater. And also, I don't think this is your purview, but it established how many bedrooms because there's a rental listing of 4 bedrooms. Are you okay with your assessment of that as a recommendation if the board so approves?
Well, we obviously would be okay with the variance to the wetland, but we wouldn't be okay without getting the variance to the groundwater. We obviously would be okay. Well, I'm sure the Bucklands would be about having an inspection done in the home to make sure that there's only 3 bedrooms. I believe Mrs. Buckland told me that one of the dining rooms has occasionally been used as a bedroom, and the realtors had advertised it that way. But they're more than happy to convert that room or make sure it's only used as a dining room. And this happens quite a bit, as you know, and this is something that could be taken care of along with the deed restriction for the 3 bedrooms.
Madam Chair?
Oh.
I think this is probably for Don. The portion of the property is wetland, so the 32,700 square footage that's listed, is that including the wetlands or excluding? Because wetlands are not supposed to be considered for the septic systems.
That's including the wetland. And, I think we've had this conversation before. There is no regulation that says you can't use it. In Title V, it allows you to use wetlands as long as it's not underwater. So nothing has really changed as far as I know, as far as that goes. I know, you had discussed it in the past, Kerry, about making that a regulation, but as of now, there's no regulation for that. And also, I think that's really, that would be key, obviously, if we were increasing the flow and we were using area as part of the nitrogen loading calculations. But in this case, the amount of wetlands really isn't relevant because we have the same flow and we're doing the best we can for that same flow.
Reason why I bring it up again is that, I think it may not be in Title V, but I think in one of it, because John and I had a back and forth a couple months ago and that there is something in some regulation about how wetland can be excluded from calculation for septic.
It is excluded from lot area calculations, I can tell you that, so I don't know, maybe if that's something you were thinking about.
Yeah, okay, well,
If we were creating a new lot, we could only include 10% of the lot area as wetland.
okay. And again, just, and this, again, this is for the variance, because there was mention about the loan request. This particular proposal is just about the variance, not about a loan request, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
John, could we ask you about the thinking of the department?
Sure, yeah. Just briefly on the wetland question, that's in the Wellhead Protection District regulation, Carrie.
Okay, okay, thank you. I knew it was something to do with some areas, but okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yep. And then just to hark back on, in 2020, this came before the board, and they did allow the wetland, this variance to the setback to the wetland, but did deny the 3-foot separation to groundwater. As it was just mentioned, the loan is available to these people. I do think Don did do a good design, and they incorporated, nitrogen reducing technology in the perk system, which is the drip dispersal system, which, as was referenced, George Hoyfelder, his opinion is that's the best, and I happen to agree with that as well, in terms of leaching performance. It is allowed by Title V, the 3-foot separation. I am concerned, since the wetland is nearby, and in the soil log, the characteristic of the soil color was clay, which is more a bluish gray color, instead of typically when you have redox or modeling, you'd have orange, and in this case, it'd be gray. So the bluish color noted added to it kind of tells me that this is more saturated than, it seems to be constantly saturated. So, I'm a little surprised that groundwater wasn't found at the time based on that description. But again, it is close to that wetland, and this perched water table is still groundwater. So there still is an effect to it, and again, it doesn't align with what our local regulations are. Yes. No additional bedrooms. It had been mentioned, I believe Sean had been in contact with the property owner and discussed things, and due to the size of the lot, saying that, technically 4 bedrooms is available, and but as of now, it's a 3-bedroom design. And you can make it a restriction, yep.
John, may I ask you to repeat Mr. Cooper, Jim's question? So I don't think the public could hear it because the mic's.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so we could make that 3-bedroom thing, so there's a restriction for no more bedrooms.
You can, yeah, based on allowing a variance, yeah.
And you're all right with the system?
It's pretty much the best system you can have. Well, there are some out there and that aren't approved for general use, but provisional that might be a little bit better. But at this point in time, it is more or less one of the best. Unless you were to add some sort of disinfectant unit, to the effluent before it, so it was treated before it went into the drip dispersal system. Other than that, it's pretty top of the line system. Again, Title V does allow it. The way I kind of look at it is it's allowed, it's kind of the minimum standard allowed. It's not, it's not ideal. You're asking for something, so, and as I said, the wetland's nearby, so that's just more concern.
But your recommendation is to approve the variance for the septic system?
The
For the new-
setback,
For the,
the setback to the wetland, but not the separation distance to 3 feet. I believe the loan program's available, a mounded system is possible, so it's possible to design a system that would meet that compliance. I don't know if,
Yeah, if I may, I don't disagree with John about the color of the soil. That's one of the reasons I brought up about the fact that the full foundation is there, it's dry, there are no issues. Yeah, that soil does become saturated and it does create soil model, the models and the redox. And that wetland is there because of that soil layer that continues on northerly. But again, we're not going into that soil layer or below the perch water table. We're still 3 feet above it. And the other thing that I'd like to say is when the system goes in, that entire layer is going to be removed down to the sand. New sand is going to be brought in so that when the soil absorption system goes in, the only thing below it is sand. And there's not going to be this saturated soil, possible saturated soil below the system. That's part of the design to strip out all that material. So again, it's not like this system is going to be 3 feet above any standing water or water table. No, it's going to be about 20 feet above it. By removing all that soil, there won't be any interaction with the effluent coming out of the system for to the water table until you hit about 20 feet. And I think a lot has probably changed since the last time we asked for the variance. Again, like I say, it's in the sewer needs area. Sooner or later, this will be sewered, whether it's 5 or 10 years. And again, we also didn't have a cost on the system. And I have to admit, variances have always been difficult to come by. But I think with the new board, I think it's not unreasonable to reconsider some of the stances of the past boards. I know in the past, we almost never got variances approved, and I think in the last 4 years, I think the board's taken a closer look at things, and in my opinion, has been more reasonable about it when you look at it from an environmental or health standpoint, like hopefully you do in this case, and not just from a technical aspect, and not just for the sake of not granting any variances.
Madam Chair,
we're
if I
also
could-
happy to continue this meeting if you want more time to think about it. We're obviously in no rush. Anything that happens at the site is most likely going to happen after the season anyway.
Madam Chair, if I may ask a question through you to Dawn.
yes, of course.
Dawn, is the property currently in the sewer district?
No, it's not. But I think, that would be, when the town starts to study that area, obviously the first thing that they would probably do is increase the sewer district in that area to include those properties.
And then secondly, the excavation note on the plan, so the silt loam layer went down to 96 inches, so that's, 8 feet.
Correct.
So you're going to remove that entire layer, that 8 feet?
Correct. And that's actually the largest cost component for the system is to remove that and bring sand in. And that's another reason we're asking not only for the retaining walls, but it would reduce how much more sand has to come in by that 2-foot depth as well.
Madam Chair?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
For Don, again, can you explain more about removing the soil below the absorption system? So essentially that the clayish type stuff would be totally gone, and below the absorption system will be sand, and that, how far down will that go?
That would go down the 8 feet. So we would dig down 8 feet, take out all that material until we get to that coarse sand layer. There's a very defined line between that layer and the sand layer. So it's,
And in terms of from the side, so I mean, you're digging out like a box, taking all that stuff out, filling with sand. Is there
Mhm.
any kind of, any kind of that would mitigate water coming in from the sides or anything? I mean, in the, with that clay soil, I don't know how, I don't understand that as much. So
Yeah.
I understand, but would the sides be in any way be protected? Or this box that you've kind of dug out?
Yeah, so what usually happens, and I've seen a lot of these, when they dig it out, depends on what time of year that you do the digging, because when we were there in February, there was no water coming in or weeping on the sides. But if it's wet and there is water weeping on the sides, generally what happens is it will come in to the excavation, and usually it just slowly bleeds in or drips in, and then it runs out. It stops because there's not a huge volume that's going to be sitting on top of that layer. And then, when they dig it out, and usually, within a day, they'll fill it in with sand. So there's not much, sloughing of the soil or falling into the excavation. It really depends on how wet it is and what time of year it is. But I honestly wouldn't anticipate that there would be, a lot of water, pouring in on the sides. There'd be some weeping probably if we're, depending on the rainfall that we've had before they do the excavation.
Yeah, and what was the water direction flow
It,
there?
it flows northwest.
Okay.
John, can I ask you the risk to approving, I think your recommendation is to approve the upgraded septic, but what would be the risk if we approved both parts?
Well, the bigger risk to me is the separation of groundwater. You're always wanting to protect, that separation. And I believe either George presented at the last meeting, or I've been in seminars with him, and there has been, Mass TC has documented different levels of 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 feet of separation of groundwater and the removal of pathogens, and that making a difference. So I'm always in favor of the 4 feet for that, which is the standard for Title V. Locally, it's 5 feet due to our soil being mostly sand, so the percolation rate is less than 2 minutes per inch. So you want another added foot level for in theory, more treatment as it goes down. If I may, if they're going to remove and replace all that confining layer that they're hitting with clean sand, and we can have documentation of that clean sand being deposited there for the system, that would be helpful. As well as if I can ask a question to Dawn about installation of a curtain drain or some, protective barrier, kind of as Carrie was touching on.
So if they dug
Yeah, that's something we could add a note to the plan that that the engineer, most likely myself, be present during the excavation, and if it's determined that any shoring is needed, that we can put shoring in. Well, that can be a condition of the permit. I think if shoring is going to be needed, they'll probably, be prepared to have it if needed. But most likely, the best way to do it would probably just go out there and do a test pit before they actually plan on doing the complete excavation to make sure that it's not, super saturated or water is weeping. That might be a better condition if you're willing to approve it. is that, we go out there with the Board of Health, within a week of this excavation beginning to do another test pit and to determine, any saturation of weeping or anything like that. And then we could, propose any measures to mitigate that. I think that would be reasonable. And, one last comment while I have the floor again, I'm sorry. I don't think this would be setting a precedent, because I think this is a different situation, seeing that there's already a system that was there, approved, inspected, certificate of compliance, and all that. I can't imagine all the systems that we do that we're going to run into this again, but you never know.
What I'm doing is looking for a compromise, and it sounds to me like this could be the compromise to require this sort of extra step that you're talking about and Don was referring to.
Yeah, I think that those are good proposals, which Don just made. I'm not sure if the owner has their hand up. I'm not sure if they want to speak again or not.
You're not sure if the owner what?
I don't see that.
If they want to talk, they have their hand up.
Oh,
I'm fine with what Mr. Bracken has to say. He's the expert in all of this. And I totally feel that I trust in his decisions and his suggestions. Thank you. That's it. I don't know how to take my hand down.
okay.
And Madam Chair, and there was also the mention of the bedroom deed restriction too, as well.
Okay, so I think we should get ready to sort of wind this up. Is everybody, can someone,
Well, I just
Make a
want to ask one more
motion.
question. Even if they dig that out 8 foot and they put sand there, it still doesn't matter because the water's still going to come up to 3 foot.
Not if that restrictive layer is removed, that confining layer, that kind of more or less impervious type of a layer there, that's confining layer, I should say. If that's removed, then and sand replaces it, then yeah, then it'll drain. So it's a lot to excavate.
So in our motion, we could say also clean sand, just because I'm looking on the GIS and it looks like there's a lot of the lot is wetlands. And then I think it's a farm right behind it, correct? Where it is, I'm just looking at the map of where it is and I think there's a
I know there is a farm
Farm
back
right
there. I'm
there.
not sure exactly how.
So I just would, one, be concerned about polluting the groundwater and the wetlands all there, like whatever we could do to protect all of that because we need clean water. Right, I mean, that's.
Yeah, I mean,
'cause- So whatever we need to, whatever needs to happen to protect that.
My only comment is, more is less technically in this scenario. So I can't argue that, but, it's whether it's reasonable or not. And I think there's been some steps taken here and in this meeting right now, just being proposed to help mitigate a lot of that.
So I think what we're looking for, John, is your, how to word it when we make the motion.
Okay.
Is that,
Do-
is that right? What we would want to have included?
I just want, could we put this thing on hold till we see exactly what they say they can do when they put the 8 foot, when they dig it out 8 foot, so when it gets to that point, we have to see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the board you can choose to do what you want.
Well, I think
I'm
Mr. Bracken
just not-
suggested
I just don't
that,
want to say, yeah, okay, that's what you're going to do it. I want to make sure it's done.
he said we could continue, suggested we continue to next month. So let's say that we would do that and we want to see exactly how this
Right.
mitigation process would take
Right.
place.
Right. and restrict it with that system so there's no more bedrooms.
Correct, yep, I mean,
Yeah,
Carrie,
we're fine with that. I can revise the plan and show that information for your review for the next meeting.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just one quick question, and it'll be for Don. You mentioned about the siltation fence. Is that,
Mhm.
is that in that pit, or is that something else, referred to someplace else in the drawing?
That's outside of it. That's from the house. If you see, look at the plan, it goes from the right front corner of the house toward the right property line.
Yeah.
That's so that not, control any erosion potentially going toward the wetland.
Okay.
We do have to go back to the Conservation Commission. We did get their approval the first round, but we'll have to go back to them with this final plan. We can't go to them until the Board of Health actually approves it. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
all right, so we will continue until next month with a little bit more specific details.
so, yeah, you'll need a motion for that.
Motion to continue until next month when we can have more information.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
I.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Aye.
Ann? Aye. All right, that's what we're gonna do then.
Thank you.
Number 13, a public hearing relative to the fee schedule update. I think the fee schedule is in reference to short-term rentals registration, correct?
Have you opened a public hearing, Madam Chair?
All right, I am opening a public hearing.
Curtis Barnes. First of all, I want to commend you for a very healthy and robust discussion about rentals, and I think we're making progress. I would also remind you that Mr. Dixon pointed out that the state regulation is that you can make your fees equal to the costs of providing the service. As I've mentioned before, Yarmouth charges $80 for registration annually. Barnstable charges $95. Our registration fee initially was set at $250. I don't want to argue whether that was correct or not, but I would like to request that in setting the new fee or looking at the registration fee, that you consider making the re-registration half of the initial. That is, if you're registering your house for the first time, $250 is fine. But when you re-register, and that means 1,300 of us, would you consider making that $125 per year as the adjusted fee for re-registrations? That's my request to the board. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, just if I may jump in there, the fee schedule, that short-term rental fee is not within this fee schedule. This is for all our other permits. The fee for short-term rental is in the regulation, chapter 338. All right, chapter 338, so.
So that would require a change to 338 and adopted by the Board of Health and be approved by the Select Board.
I guess my question is to all of us and also to Mr. Barnes, what's the purpose of having the renewals be less?
Well, my answer, Madam Chair, is I think $250 was an arbitrary number picked out of the air without real backup. And I think it's an excessive fee. So if you don't re-register at 125, then I would say consider registration at 125. I have no idea how anyone came up with $250 as a registration compared to what the fees are in other communities that have been in the rental registration business for over 20 years. So that's my point.
Would it make sense to do a little survey of southeastern New England and see? I mean, Curtis mentioned 2 places, but I'm sure there are many others.
Madam Chair, I think the cost of doing business on Nantucket is significantly more than anywhere else. And the cost of a rental is significantly more than anywhere else. And I think that what we have seen is with being able to do, I mean, it sounds like coming down the pipeline is whether it's the health department or the fire department, somebody's going to have to be going and checking all of these places that are registered and make sure that they have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors that are installed and working, and time is money.
Madam, sorry,
right?
I'm sorry. Madam Chair, if I may, so that's in the regulation. The short-term fee is in the Chapter 338. So what this public hearing about is our current fee schedule for food permits, septic permits, and all that. So this agenda item does not include a short-term rental fee, in short, is what I'm saying. So if the board would like to discuss that
Okay,
separately,
all right,
then.
Okay. I guess I had been led to think differently. I didn't realize it was about all of our fees.
Correct, yep.
So it's not about this fee.
It's about
Well,
septic
Madam Chair, then
permits.
through you, I would request that you follow through on your suggestion, do a survey, figure out how and why this fee or a fee should be established. And if the fire department is going to do the inspections, that's fine, but then that doesn't impact your fee, I don't think. So I accept the comment and ask that you do the survey, and let's talk about it next time, or in 2 meetings. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can I have a question about the fees, I guess? Why did you change from 4 times the permit fee to just $500?
It's kind of more an financial administration thing in our department, as far as the system that we use, and Tamika's fully aware with it, and just the way that money's collected and then gone through to finances gets a little mixed up because it says the permit should cost this much, and then you multiply times 4, but that's not really in our system. It has to be manually entered differently. So we thought that just a flat fee of $500 for operating without a permit is much easier financially, time-wise to handle, so.
And I'll add that these fees here, when John was reviewing them, were based on the amount of effort and work, inspector time, front office time that's required to go through, evaluate it before it is approved. So it is, whether it's 4 times or it's a flat number, that flat number is based on the work that's required.
Any thoughts?
Madam Chair, yeah, if I can speak
sir.
and expand
John.
on Rocky's comment there, yeah. So I took a lot of, the food establishments, septic permits, times with camps, pools, body art, we only have 1, but measured the time on all though, on many of them, took them together and took the median number out of that and the amount of time. And that includes office time, Tamika's time as far as processing permits, scheduling inspections, uploading things to our database, plan review time, travel time, inspections, re-inspection time, correspondence that our inspectors have with establishments, if it's correction orders and such. So again, I took incorporated all those things into, traffic and those types of things and incorporated it, and took the median number. And these are how these new fees were established. And I just wanted to check with other towns just to see how we measured up. And actually, our food permits were lower than many of the towns, on definitely the Vineyard and Cape, and even other towns. I looked on the North Shore a little bit too, and South Shore. And for the most part, I would say 80% of the town's fees were actually higher than ours for food. So, and then I wish, this isn't something, unfortunately, it's not something I want to do on businesses and such, but we do put in a lot of time with a lot of these things, and that's just the way that it operates. So, yeah, there's a lot of time, so. And this wouldn't go into effect as it's drafted until January 1st of 2026, so.
I would only comment that I think you're selling yourself short. We went from 4 times the permit fee for operating without a permit. So if somebody has a pool that they're operating without a permit, 4 times that fee would have been $800 now, and now it's only $500. Is that operating anything without a permit?
So, Madam Chair, if I may, yeah. One thing too that the board could consider is they could deem any kind of operation without a permit for any of these would be, a nuisance, which that fee is $1,000. If it's determined that there's a cause of sickness or danger to, health and safety, welfare for the public. So it could be considered up to $1,000 if it meets the nuisance law. So that's not something we want to, necessarily bag people on. However, obviously, there's importance for us to inspect and maintain compliance and make sure that people are meeting the standards. Because, operating a pool without proper disinfecting, safety equipment and all that obviously is a major concern. So, self-latching gates. So,
Madam Chair? Yeah. John, is this a public hearing as like an advisory, and then this will be put back on an agenda to pass, or are we actually passing these tonight or adjudicating this tonight?
So, it was basically advertised as a public hearing as a courtesy or
so it was already
to the public. So it was published in three papers before the meeting as a this isn't a regulation, but more of something of a that affects the public. So we felt the public hearing was the necessary thing to do for this.
And if you wanted to give the public an extra month to weigh in and leaving the hearing open, you could certainly do that and vote on it next month if you wanted to do that.
Okay.
So we leave it open for 1 more month to allow for comments?
Motion to continue it until,
May I?
Yeah.
Make your motion. I'll second for discussion, then I make my comment, please.
just motion to continue it until next month to allow comment?
Yeah, second for discussion, then just add, this is often that's something that comes up at select board a lot, and my colleague Matt very much said this. Actually, he brought this up last night in Libby's town manager report, which is fees don't go up for a while, and then all of a sudden there's sort of a shock. Yeah, this is town-wide. This is not health department centric or whatever. And then there's a shock, and maybe the best thing to do is, instead of it going up 2 years or 3 years, whatever, to do a cost of living adjustment so the fees go up with that. I'm not sure that's right for the health department. It might be unique. But I think that's something worth considering for us if they are going to go up annually. I'll leave that up to staff to figure that out. But yeah, I'll leave it at that when seconding Mary's motion.
Okay, all in favor of this motion as with a consideration? Jim?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Anne? Aye. All right, so we leave it open for one more month for further comment. Okay. Good. I'm still here, as you can see, because the vote was canceled. So anyway, we are now on number 14, which is our environmental contamination update.
Yeah, hi again. Thank you. One more PFAS update for the night, and I will share my screen again. Can you all see that?
So far.
Yep. Okay, great. Should be a relatively quick update. I'll do my monthly overview of new data and just a very quick update on our contracts with the consulting firm TRC. So we have some new important data from Mass DEP's source discovery investigation from the Hummock Pond Oak Hollow area. One of the residents in that area recently detected at 467 parts per trillion. That's a high number. To give a little bit of context, at Tom's Way, the highest concentration that had been detected there was 787. A little more context, we already had 3 imminent hazard detections in this area at 87 parts per trillion, 171, and 124. So this is quite a bit higher than those detections even. And just as a reminder, Mass DEP, just a few hundred feet away, had detected concentrations as low as 2 parts per trillion. So this, paints even a starker picture of just how variable PFAS concentrations can be on the island. So Mass DEP's investigation in this area is continuing. I have been speaking with them frequently. They are still trying to identify a potentially responsible party. Last month, I had shared that Mass DEP was planning to come onto the island in July 22nd, to do additional sampling. Unfortunately, they didn't receive any signed access agreements, so they canceled that trip. But the next week, the health department sent letters to 23 residents to encourage them to participate in DEP's investigation. And so Mass DEP was actually on the island last week to do more sampling. And our health department provided transportation to DEP. We want to make sure DEP is able to get to the island as easily as possible so that they can continue their investigation. When they were on the island, they sampled at 4 additional homes, and they did 2 resamples. One of those resamples was at the imminent hazard detection, the new one. Mass DEP's policy is that they do resample imminent hazard detections. So that's on the Mass DEP side. We have quite a bit of new data from our voluntary efforts and private well regulations, which generate a valuable source of data. Since last month's Board of Health meeting, we got a new detection above the state standard of 20 parts per trillion on Corby Way. I forwarded that detection to Mass DEP for consideration in their ongoing investigation. And then we have a mix of non-detects and a mix of detects below the state standard of 20. And I've reached out to all of these residents to offer assistance. So moving to our map, we have 1 new imminent hazard detection and 1 new detection above the state standard. They're mostly in the areas where we have already seen detections of PFAS. So, we use these buffers to keep people aware of PFAS have been detected on the island. these all should look pretty similar to what has been shown last month, just because the new detections are in the similar areas where we've already identified PFAS. Of course, we're keeping the numbers updated. Those are important, in my opinion, for just understanding how much we know in each area. And I'm continually updating these numbers. We've exceeded over 200 data points that have gone through the health department, through our regulations, and people who are testing voluntarily. I've actually gotten a big influx in the past couple days. I would guess in a couple months we'll be over 300. We're generating PFAS data at a pretty quick rate, which is great to see. And I always include this graph. It's just another way of slicing the data. You can see the distribution of how often PFAS are detected at different levels. Last update for me, I've had these TRC contracts as a standing item on my Board of Health updates for the last few months. We do expect to have some results to share about the PFAS fingerprinting in the Tom's Way area, either at the next meeting or the following meeting. So that'd be in October. I will keep you all updated. And then, as discussed previously, we have a ongoing needs assessment related to data management with TRC. So that's my update. Happy to take any questions.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much. Have all of the people that live within a mile of the Oak Hollow and the Corby Way that have wells been made aware? Or I don't know if they just came in the last day, or if that's being reached out, just because I think both of those homes are in areas where there's a lot of houses within a mile that probably have wells.
Yeah, so on the imminent hazard front, we reach out to everyone who's within 500 feet. Those are the folks that are also reached out to by Mass DEP as part of their source discovery investigation. But we don't reach out individually to people within a mile for imminent hazard detections or for detections over 20. You are right that there are a lot of people within a mile. It would be quite a number of people that would receive letters in that case. So we really go for more of a general approach, stressing that PFAS have been identified in many places on the island. If you consider how many people live within a detection of 20 parts per trillion on the island, how many people live within 1 mile, it's a lot. It's a very, very large portion of the island.
Sorry to interrupt, and I know that
Yeah.
we've been here for a long time, but the public schools are within a mile of Corby Way and a number of preschools. And so I don't know, I mean, the public schools have their own wells for watering, and I don't know how deep they are. But I mean, those are all within a mile of Corby Way, and I understand it was 20. I don't know what the number was. You just said over 20. But I mean, that is I just would be very concerned. That's a lot of people and very young population that would be affected. So I don't know who would be in charge of alerting people that live, whether you ask the newspaper or the Current to put something in encouraging anyone that lives within the 1 mile radius of those places, or how. I just think that affects a lot of people, me included, because I work at the public schools and I drink the water, and this makes me think twice about that. But I also, kids fill their water bottles up there, and I mean, that's a significant.
Yeah, I would be happy to send a letter to the schools. I think that's a good suggestion. It's a larger group of people that we can reach in a single letter. And then, in the past, we've interviewed with the newspapers and they've republished our maps, which is great for getting the word out.
I'll just add that Andrew's been very active about reaching out to get the word out to test, that everybody should consider testing if you own a private well, not just within a mile, so that it's something that we've actively, or he has actively tried to convey in a number of different formats, whether that be online, whether that be interviews. But that school suggestion is a good one.
Yeah, I think that certainly Rocky knows this probably better than any of us. In infectious disease, if you are a contact of someone who has certain diseases, you can be contacted by the Department of Health, and informed of that, it can also be anonymous who the contact was. So to me, this is almost the same thing. And I don't know if it would require a change in our protocols or policies or something to do that. But, maybe it's something we ought to look at within a certain geographic area of a high detect.
And I think we've had this conversation before, and I think the question is whether or not a letter to somebody's house is going to be as effective or more effective than reaching out in many different ways that we can. We would be, if we're talking about people within, just focusing on people within a mile of a home, then we are potentially talking about multiple letters going out to the same people over and over again, and the effectiveness of something like that, as opposed to what Andrew has been trying to do, which is just really get the word out to in as many different ways as we can, including social media, about testing your well.
It's worth a future conversation, I think, what makes the most sense. Because I do think that a certified letter from the Department of Health gets your attention.
Member of the public has their hand up. If you.
Meg?
Hi, it's Meg. It's Meg Ruley again. How are you? As I mentioned a public comment, again, I want to reiterate, I think that having a field in the short-term rental database asking if a homeowner is on a private well, if they have a filtration system, and if encourage them to test their water if they haven't, is really important. I'm a real estate broker, and I talk about this with clients who are on private wells because people have asked me, tenants have asked me to see well test results, not just for PFAS, for other things as well. If a property's on well and septic, and the well regulations, the local regulations 386.8 say that tenants can ask a homeowner at any time for those results, and that you go to the Board of Health to get those. So I just want to reiterate that. The other thing, and you did answer my question, I had written a letter to you just asking about when you find these high detects, for example, on Tom's Way, now Oak Hollow, and there are projects going on, abutting properties where impacted parties know the high levels of contamination. What do you do when they're digging 7 or 10-foot or deeper basements, and what are they doing with that soil? And they aren't required to test. You don't know whether or not their soil is contaminated because there are variables. But what kind of guidance or uh, process is the Board of Health contemplating in dealing with some of this? Because if this soil is going over out to Baxter Road or somewhere else to another property, is it going off island? Like, no one know, are we just moving it around? And it could be really contaminated. So, and then just educating some of the boards, like all this information Andrew presents is great. But I feel as a resident, it's very much in a vacuum unless you go to these meetings. This has been a long meeting. This is at the end of the meeting. And, are people on these various boards, whether it's planning, zoning, that are approving variances for things, are they educated? Because I've been at meetings where they're telling people, oh, did you hear what Wannacomet Water's doing? They're filtering, so it's gonna hopefully get rid of the plume on Tom's Way. And it's like, really? Like, are they not that knowledgeable to know that that's okay? So these are just things that I feel like the Board of Health, maybe you're already addressing, but it is a concern. I think about it a lot, especially after what we went through on our street. And I'll just leave it at that. So thank you for listening and protecting the health of island residents and visitors.
Thank you. Okay.
I do think the town is involved in some significant construction not far from Tom's Way, 2 streets over. And what kind of PFAS contamination would have moved that way or been exposed? Since we're talking about alerting people, I'm looking at the map, they're not that far away, and I don't know if I've not been following that, but I don't know what kind of testing or what they're doing with the dirt, with all of that, the Habitat homes that I think they're building right down the street. So something our favorite select board member, it is a concern when you start to see this popping up in very dense local neighborhoods. And again, I know we've been here a long time, so I won't keep beating a dead horse here, but that is something that we should, and I think Andrew's doing an amazing job reaching out in lots of different ways that reaches a lot of different people. I just get concerned when I start to think about where there are a lot of children and the long-term effects that this would have on them.
Am I up?
You're up.
Okay, I just have a few things. I know everyone's tired. So Dr. Sam Talford from Tufts was here July 31st and August 1st. He was enrolling participants, really year-round residents on Nantucket, in a zoonotic study. So we think about it in terms of ticks, but it was actually drawing blood because he'll be looking for other mosquito related past infections and others. So he will be back again in October. He had a really successful recruitment when he was here. Over 100 participants came to the trailers to be part of that, and ultimately it'll be around maybe 200 or so. And I have to warn you, it's a 5-year study. So he'll be wanting your blood every year for the next 5 years. But I think it's going to provide a really good indication of the exposure. What kind of exposure do we have to tick-borne diseases, or does the general population, the population that's here year-round, have to these infections? We published, I think last time I provided an update, I talked about the wastewater surveillance that we had begun doing. There's really an expansion of the COVID screening that we'd be doing at the wastewater treatment plant. So we added flu, RSV, and some high-risk substances and opioids. And that has gotten a lot of media attention to the point where we wanted to collect some baseline information, but we also felt that it was important to get the information published online as quickly as we could. So we did that. We created some narrative around it as to why we were doing it and why it's important and how the data will be used. We plan to update that data often, and when the fall comes around, we'll do things like add the flu dashboard, COVID again, and RSV. Our wonderful intern, Isabel Urban, has been here all summer, and she is just finishing up. Her last day is tomorrow. She was involved in many different things, got involved with a lot of the sampling, the beach sampling that was occurring on a weekly basis, and a lot of other activities. Pretty much anything she was asked to do, she was game for. But one of the important things that she worked on was developing a best practices document, really a white paper for vaccine, how to improve vaccine penetration on Nantucket. So she spoke to 13 different jurisdictions who had much higher success than we did last year to try and understand what they did that was successful. And she captured that data as well as along with the literature review. And we'll be able to use that information to begin some putting together some strategies that will be helpful to us here in the town to improve our vaccine penetration, certainly around flu. And we have begun purchasing flu vaccine. We have not begun purchasing COVID vaccine, but I don't think there's clarity yet. The state has not made it available as to what will be available, but we are still waiting. And when we have more clarity on that, we'll start ordering. We also lost we didn't lose, the state lost funding or stopped funding the contractors that were coming out here every year to provide these flu clinics for us. So we're going to have to do that as a town. And so that's the things that we're thinking through right now is how to do that. And it's even things like how do we bill somebody who's private pay because they're not eligible for the free vaccine that comes from the state. So how do we do that in a health department that doesn't have a biller because we don't provide those types of services. So there's lots to think through that we've been working on. We certainly hope to be able to provide those clinics as we have in the past. And finally, there is, it wasn't on the agenda because we just found out about it this time, but the Cannabis Advisory Committee has had a Board of Health member previously as a member. That has been Mr. Cooper. But I believe that the term has expired and they're asking for a new, I guess, motion from the board as to who another participant for that committee moving forward. So I can put that on the agenda for next time if, unless Mr. Cooper knows he really wants to do it again. And that's all I got.
Okay, wow. Well, it's a very full meeting. Would you like to? Make a
Motion to adjourn?
Meg Ruley still has her
Oh,
hand, but I don't know if she's still looking to talk or not.
We've adjourned. Jim?
Okay, she took it down.
Second.
All in favor? Tom?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry? You still here? He says.
You're
aye.
on mute.
Aye.
Okay.
We're adjourned.
Aye.
It is so cold in this room.
I know, it's freezing.
What is going
freezing.
on?
It's freezing. All right. Let's see if I can stand up now.